Chapter 275. I like it, of course I like it. The joy in Jingwan's eyes was not fake at all. Because of the limitations of her social background, Jingwan was far less restrained than ordinary girls before she got married, even though she was pampered by her grandmother. However, there were still many restrictions, and there were very few places she could set foot in. If she did not have her previous life, she probably would not feel anything. Perhaps she would feel regret, but she would not have too much yearning. However, after experiencing the civilization of her previous life, she had been to many places and seen many cultural sceneries. Fortunately, she was able to go to a completely different place. If she could not see it, she was afraid that she would miss it after she died. However, in an instant, Jingwan was a little hesitant. Since you are traveling as an imperial envoy, is it okay for me to follow? Since there is a plan, how can there be a problem? Li Hongyuan briefly explained the situation in Zhongnan to Jingwan. Actually, it doesn't matter whether I go or not. It's not difficult to solve the problem. I've taken on this once-in-a-lifetime task, as long as I still want to bring you to Zhongnan to play legitimately. I'm a prince, and I'm even more special. Even if I leave the capital, I'll just take a stroll in the surrounding areas. If I want to go too far, it's impossible for me to do so without an imperial order. Ah Yuan. Such a man, even if she was bullied from time to time, he was also willing to endure it. His wife didn't have many preferences, but it wasn't easy to satisfy them. Every time he saw her sparkling eyes, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He didn't have such a feeling when everything was under his control. However, while satisfying her, he was also very satisfied. Of course, when it came to things like his wife throwing herself into his arms, he was even more impolite. However, Ah Yuan, the matter in Zhongnan, it was not you who caused it, right? She definitely shouldn't do something like toying with the feudal vassals. She might be a bit special, but she was still more ordinary. She couldn't bear such a sin. In essence, it was all men's fault for causing the downfall of a country. However, they were the source of it. Even if they didn't do anything, they still had to bear a share of the sins that they had committed. What if I say yes? What will Wan do? Li Hongyuan asked seriously. Jingwan looked at him and couldn't tell if he was telling the truth. She frowned and said, "If that's the case, then even if I go to hell, I'll be with you. Just don't do it again. Ah Yuan, you've done a lot for me, but I can't do anything for you. I just want you to be well." She couldn't criticize him in the name of righteousness. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Of course it's not true. This matter has always existed. I just got someone to expose it at the right time to get rid of a group of vermin in advance. I pray for the next life with Wan, but it's enough for me to go to hell. You just have to wait for me up there. Jingwan's eyes were slightly wet, and her lips moved. She wanted to ask why was he so good to her? She looked forward to the answer, but she was also afraid of the answer. Because this man's kindness to her seemed to have existed from the beginning. It was so inexplicable, how could she not mind? She knew what state she was in now. Because she cared, she minded. It had only been a month, and this man had made her fall to this point. It could be imagined how high and how terrible his methods were. Ah Yuan, don't let me down, please don't let me down. Otherwise, I might really go crazy and kill people. I can give in and tolerate everything else, but this is the only thing I can be selfish. Knowing that you're suffering down there, how could I wait up there as if nothing had happened? That kind of anxiety, I'd rather exchange it for physical pain. Perhaps, as long as I could see you, I'd be able to smile even if I had to endure the same pain as you. Even though her eyes were filled with tears, Jingwan still smiled. It was probably the first time that Li Hongyuan heard Jingwan express her feelings so clearly. He was a little surprised, but more than that, he spontaneously felt joy. He clasped the back of Jingwan's head and unceremoniously kissed her. Jingwan naturally didn't refuse, and there was a deeper passion that she didn't have in the past. There was no surprise that the heavenly thunder attracted the earth fire. However, the maidservants were already used to the two of them taking the initiative to retreat when they were together. If they weren't called, they basically wouldn't appear. And Mama Gong, who knew more, was even stricter with them. There were some things that didn't benefit them at all if they heard it. Li Hongyuan knew that he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop today. He didn't care, outsiders couldn't break into Hai Tang restaurant, but there was only him and Jingwan here. If he didn't go out, there would always be people who would have a lot of imaginations. He was very clear that once it was revealed that he was going to take Jingwan to Jiangnan, she would definitely receive attention from all sides. At this time, it was better to stop. It could be considered the first time that he came to stop. Jingwan's face was flushed, and she was a little embarrassed. She knew that now was not the right time. Sure enough, after hanging around a certain someone for so long, she became more and more unbridled and outrageous. Li Hongyuan didn't tease her. He said something else to let the waves of passion in his body gradually subside. Jingwan told him about the 4 people, Shi, Gu, and Fu. Oh, it's inconvenient for Qingshi to go out, so let her stay. As for the other 3 people's wedding, let's wait until they come back. No need. The day after tomorrow, all 4 of them will be married off. Li Hongyuan decided. Jingwan was speechless. That's too rushed. How can 2 days be enough to prepare a wedding? Their wedding has probably been prepared for a long time. The so-called guests are just people in the Fu. Not to mention 2 days, even tonight is enough for them to consummate their marriage. Jingwan couldn't help but want to facepalm. Having this kind of master, they were really unlucky. This isn't a problem with the guests, okay? Although they already have a marriage partner, the 3 books and 6 rites, how can the entire agenda be completed in 1 or 2 days? Don't tell me that the agenda has already been completed, and only the last step is left. Without reporting to Master, do they have the guts to talk about marriage? Since it's Master's decision, all the red tape can naturally be skipped. No one will deny the marriage between them. Everything that Master gives is grace. Li Hongyuan said matter-of-factly. Fine, fine, fine. Whatever you say. It's just that I've only been married for a month, and I've already married off my husband's personal maidservants. Her reputation as a jealous woman was probably going to be tarnished. Although she knew that the 4 maidservants weren't bedwarmers, outsiders didn't know. Slow down? Can't you take it slow? Since we have to do it anyway, why not do it all at once? It's troublesome to do it over and over again. He drank vinegar all day long and was a jealous man. As his wife, she naturally had to clean up all the flowers and plants around him. I can't win against you. It was better to prepare more dowries for the 4 of them. She felt wronged at the wedding, so she could only compensate in other places. Moreover, as long as she wanted to monopolize him, she would have to face this sooner or later. It didn't matter if it was earlier or later. This time, I'll do my best to arrange for the waterway to Jiangnan. However, the carriage definitely can't be lacking. You'll feel uncomfortable if you sit in the carriage for too long. This is always a problem. Those people from the Ministry of Works are really useless. I've asked them to modify the carriage, but they still haven't had any good results. This is my own problem. Moreover, the bumpy ride in the carriage isn't just the carriage's problem. Unfortunately, she didn't know the formula for cement. Even if she only knew the general idea, if she gave it to someone to study, there was a 90% chance that they would succeed in the end. The carriage itself was a shock absorber. As long as the wheels were replaced with gum, it would be greatly improved. However, at this moment, Jingwan suddenly felt that even if she had lived in a mechanical and electronic civilization, she was actually a piece of trash. For the first time in more than 10 years of life, she began to deny herself. Thinking about it, it was enough. It was said that people with motion sickness had to sit in more carriages and suffer a few more times before they would be fine. Jingwan wondered if she should also try it. Will Su Guifei let you enter the palace? Fu Huang is currently in a fit of anger. How could she do such a stupid thing? Not to mention her, before we leave, my brothers won't come. As for the main entourage, those who are a bit more daring will come. In addition, those sisters-in-law of yours will definitely come looking for you. If you don't want to pay attention to them, then refuse them all. In any case, it will only be 2 or 3 days at most. There's no time to see them one by one. Then I'll see them all together. Jingwan smiled. At that time, she was afraid that no one would speak in front of her. Offending no one, but offending everyone? Li Hongyuan tacitly followed up. At least on the surface, no one will say anything. Very Banwang style. Indeed, how many people hated Jin Qinhuang to the point of gnashing their teeth, but in front of him, they didn't dare to fart. This isn't marrying a chicken to follow the chicken, marrying a dog to follow the dog. Marrying Jin Qinhuang, one must have the awareness of being the enemy of the whole world. Jingwan faintly said. This is very good. Wan, continue to maintain it. Wait until the day when Wan doesn't need me and can make everyone angry at you but not dare to say anything. You've cultivated to the peak. Towards a certain someone who always felt good about himself and always boasted shamelessly, Jingwan was now more and more calm, but she didn't want to admit it. Under normal circumstances, isn't it one who creates trouble and the other who cleans up the mess from behind? Then, the trouble that I create, Wan, are you sure you can clean it up? Heh, you really do know your own limits. Just as Li Hongyuan said, there were indeed people who came to the door, but they didn't know if it was their own intention or their master's instruction. Li Hongyuan gave them face and met them, but the first people who came were 2 great Buddhas, the Imperial Guard's commander, and the blackguard Zhuo. Their meaning was that they were following the emperor's orders. Because it was the first time they assisted Jin Qinhuang in handling an errand, so that they could come first to listen to Jin Qinhuang's admonition, understand Jin Qinhuang's way of doing things, and cultivate tacit understanding so that they could do their job better. How many people silently cursed that Lu Chengdi guarded against them as if they were thieves, not giving them the slightest chance. But since they had already come to the door, naturally it wouldn't be so simple. They turned their heads and left, expressing their lack of confidence, and could only say a bunch of words to save face, something like they would do their best to complete the errand, as long as they would listen to Jin Qinhuang's orders. When the time comes, if Jin Qinhuang had any matters, he would just have to instruct and so on. Li Hongyuan appeared to be quite patient. While drinking tea, he patiently listened to them finish speaking, then nodded and said that so-and-so Darren's words, he would remember them. Since they were so loyal to the emperor and Qi Yuan, he definitely wouldn't disappoint their good intentions. What they said today, in the future, in Jiangnan, he would definitely fulfill them. What was called moving a stone to smash one's own foot, this was it. The more words that were said, the more miserable it would be when the time came. If there was even the slightest bit of irresponsibility, at that time, your loyalty would be doubted. If you said 10 sentences and did 9 sentences well, if there was 1 sentence that was not done, you would be questioned, boasting, arrogant and conceited, and if you didn't say a sentence, but did something beautifully, you would probably be praised, wholeheartedly, well from the beginning to the end, attentively and carefully, having self-awareness. As the saying goes, they were all in the same line of work. Others had already gone to report to the peak. If you didn't go, wouldn't it be bad? And after receiving Jin Qinhuang's inhumane threat, they naturally wouldn't tell others about the situation. Everyone was the same, only then would they be able to mentally balance out. Therefore, one after another, they went to Jin Qinhuang Fu. Those who didn't have any thoughts would go in groups of 2 or even 3. Those who had selfish motives would face the 3 great Buddhas alone, with beads of sweat dripping down their hair and 2 legs trembling. Most likely, they were all just talking about face. The result, was naturally the same. Since the opening of Jin Qinhuang Fu, it was the first time that so many court officials had come to visit one after another. It was very lively. The great commander of the Imperial Guards, Zhuo of the blackguard, one was a standard 3rd rank, the other was a standard 4th rank. Both of them could be considered young and promising, but when Li Hongyuan received the court officials, they maintained silence from beginning to end. Looking at his simple and crude but extremely effective way of doing things, they didn't. Yu Zhongqing, on the other hand, didn't have any thoughts. After all, he had already pledged allegiance to him. When there were orders, he would do as he was told. When there weren't, he would do his own thing. As for Zhuo of the blackguard, this person's identity was actually a bit special. In the blackguard, although there was a standard third-rank commander and a lower third-rank commander above him, his status was on the same level as them. Sometimes, his words were more effective than the two above him. This was because he was actually Lu Chengdi's adopted son, and was even bestowed with the surname Li by Lu Chengdi. This person didn't look like he was over the top, and seemed to be about the same age as Li Hongyuan. In fact, he was only 2 years younger than Yu Zhongqing, but his face was relatively tender. However, those who knew this person basically didn't dare to look down on him. His face was sharp, and there was a hint of killing intent. It wasn't that there weren't any princes who wanted to recruit him, but they didn't dare to make a move. Whether or not they succeeded in recruiting Yu Zhongqing, there wouldn't be any harm. And because he didn't hold back in front of Lu Chengdi, no one dared to speak lightly. Li Suyen was secretly probing Li Hongyuan. Was Li Hongyuan completely unaware? Of course not. His understanding of Li Suyen was beyond others. This person, in Li Hongyuan's eyes, was actually very interesting. In everyone's eyes, he was absolutely loyal to Lu Chengdi, but in fact, he wasn't. Li Hongyuan never thought of recruiting this person, because the result would be the same. In the previous life, after Li Hongyuan ascended the throne, he understood this person and promoted him to the commander of the blackguard. He was a tyrant, and countless families were confiscated and destroyed, and Li Suyen was the executor. The two entered Jin Qin Wang Fu, and didn't seem to be prepared to leave. Li Hongyuan was too lazy to care about them, and didn't even let people arrange a place for them to stay. Secondly, these two people were used to going through wind and rain. Even if they were going to Jiangnan, they wouldn't prepare a lot of things, so it didn't matter where they stayed. Li Hongyuan didn't care, but Eunuch Mu couldn't pretend that he didn't know. Without saying anything, he went to report to the Wang Fei, and asked for the Wang Fei's instructions. Yu Zhongqing didn't say anything, but Jing Wan naturally knew. Zhua Qian of the blackguard? Thinking of last year's court examination, the 3 people who passed the Jinshu examination paraded through the streets on horseback, as if this person was the one holding the line. Of course, the premise was that the person in this position hadn't been changed. Is it the same person as last year? Eunuch Mu didn't understand, but he still answered truthfully, this Li Daran was appointed as the Zhua Qian of the blackguard 2 years ago. Although they only met once, Jing Wan still had some impression. But, you said that his surname is Li, and he's a member of the royal family? Replying to the Wang Fei, no, Li Daran is actually the emperor's adopted son. Jing Wan nodded. Although the emperor didn't take in many adopted sons, it wasn't like there weren't any. Tell me, what does the blackguard do? Eunuch Mu slightly hesitated. The blackguard is in charge of the prison, has the power to patrol and arrest, and has the discipline department, which is responsible for investigation, arrest, interrogation, and other matters. Unlike the Ministry of Justice, they are only responsible for relatively special matters, and directly report to the emperor. It was really similar to the brocade guards, but Jing Wan had never heard of the blackguard's prestige before. She didn't think that it was far from the extent that the mention of black would cause her face to change. Since they may have to stay in the Fu, you can arrange the accommodations as you see fit. Just treat them as 2 ordinary guests in the Fu. Don't neglect them, and don't be overly attentive. Just treat them as normal. In the entire Jin Qin Wang Fu, there were only 2 places that had secrets: the study room and the Begonia elegant residence. And the so-called secrets inside, those who didn't know, simply couldn't understand. Once they got their hands on it, they might throw it away as useless things. Yes. Then, this servant will go and have people prepare? I have one more thing here. The day after tomorrow, Si, Gu, and Fu will get married. Inform the prefectural magistrate to make preparations. All the expenses will be taken from the Fu. Although the time is a little short, it's better to have a lively ceremony. When she said this to Mu and Jing Wan could only try to be as calm as possible. After all, it was really not proper. However, Eunuch Mu was calmer than Jing Wan, and he didn't even feel that something was wrong. The 4 sisters are lucky to have the princess to take care of them. Sure enough, like master, like servant, the thoughts of the living king of hell had a profound effect on the people below. Jingwan had seen the future husbands of the 4 sisters before. One was a gardener and 3 guards, which was really a little unexpected. However, through a simple understanding, these people were still good in all aspects. In addition, they all worked for the Jin Qin Wang Fu, so there was nothing to be worried about. However, she just moved her lips. How could she take care of them? You flattered her as soon as you opened your mouth. Did you really deserve to be the first lackey of the living king of hell? Okay, don't talk nonsense here. Do it quickly. Yes, 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 this servant will go right away. Eunuch Mu became more flattering. But his flattery was actually not annoying. Because she didn't hide it at all, the news that Li Hongyuan's 4 personal maids were married off by Jingwan was like a gust of wind, which wrinkled the calm lake. Naturally, there were different opinions. More than 90% of the people didn't have good words. The rest thought that Jingwan's behavior was understandable. But after all, she was young and impetuous. It made people feel that she had lost her mind and done something stupid. Originally, she looked like a generous and calm girl. At this moment, Prince Jin was going to Jiangnan on an errand. At this time, she hurriedly married his personal maids. Although she stopped him from taking the beauties with him, the result was more harm than good. Such a hasty marriage made the married maids complain. If they loved Prince Jin, they would resent him even more. As for the person who married them, he was forced to take on the master's broken shoes. It would be strange if he felt comfortable in his heart. All of them were dissatisfied with the female master. In the future, when he managed the prince's mansion, there would inevitably be all kinds of troubles. Moreover, there were so many beauties in Jiangnan. If he didn't take any of them with him, he might bring a group of beauties back. Those who were worried about her but didn't know the inside story were naturally a little anxious. Including Great Elder Princess, they couldn't wait to pull Jingwan over and reprimand her. No matter what others said, Prince Jin's mansion was bustling with noise and excitement. The things used were just like those used by many officials' families. Seeing this, many servants in the mansion were envious. Even if they thought that the princess made the compensation because of a guilty conscience, it couldn't reduce their jealousy in their hearts. The 4 bridegrooms more or less all had family members present. Being praised and insulted by others, it was indescribably unpleasant. Even though their own children swore that the person they were marrying was absolutely pure and had nothing to do with the prince, the stifling feeling in their hearts was still difficult to dispel. In the end, after being repeatedly persuaded, they happily accepted their master's good intentions. That was the most important thing. Then, looking at the generous rewards that both the man and woman received, there were many who were righteous and confident. No matter what kind of rumors and slanders there were inside and outside the mansion, Jingwan was not affected at all. She even asked people to treat those words as interesting things to tell her. It was just the beginning. If it was really so easy to be influenced, how could they talk about being a couple for a lifetime? Jingwan didn't answer the invitation of her sisters-in-law. Instead, she invited them. Seeing that Jingwan was still glowing and smiling, the several princesses really didn't know what to say. It should be known that this time it was not as simple as the person who sent them the courtesans last time. At that time, they could barely find an excuse, but this time, they couldn't defend themselves. After doing this kind of thing, she could still meet people openly without any change in her expression. She was not afraid of others talking about her. It really made people envious and jealous. They also wanted to deal with their husband's concubine so neatly. Unfortunately, they couldn't. Not now, let alone in the early stage of marriage. Because of her relationship with her father, the Gong Qin Wang Fei was arrogant enough, but she had never done this kind of thing. Everyone said she was stupid. Unfortunately, they didn't even have the courage to be stupid. Because they all knew what the other's goal was. They wanted to talk to Jingwan alone, but they also wanted to stop others. Everyone thought this way, leading to the result that no one was left alone. In the end, they had to admit that today's goal was not achieved. They secretly said that Jingwan was cunning. If they weren't happy, they naturally wouldn't let her be happy. The Gong Qin Wang Fei had the deepest enmity with Jingwan, but she was repeatedly warned not to provoke Jingwan. Her heart was suffocating. When she encountered this kind of thing that satisfied her mouth, she naturally had the fastest mouth. She put on a fake smile and said that Jingwan really did beautifully. Jingwan's expression didn't change. It can't be compared to fourth sister-in-law. At least, I didn't make people completely disappear. The Gong Qin Wang Fei's face alternated between green and white. The number of foxes that were killed by her wasn't small. In this aspect, she really didn't have the qualifications to talk about others. They actually had some understanding of Jingwan's mouth. You could say that she had a sharp tongue, but in fact, she wasn't. It was just that when everyone was beating around the bush, she was like a fool who didn't understand anything. She was so straightforward that it was frightening. Ironic words were treated as righteous words. And when it came to righteous words, she could give you 9 bens and 18 bens, saying a lot of distortions that you couldn't think of. She could still make sense and tell outsiders that you couldn't deny it even if you wanted to. This kind of person, would she really do such an obvious stupid thing? At the moment, they had no choice but to carefully consider this question. The few of them went back the same way they came. Jingwan closed the door and didn't go out, happily packing up her things. There were only a few people who could make her deliver herself to their door with just a few words. However, at this time, they didn't look for Jingwan. It seemed that they all had a tacit understanding to wait until Jin Qin Wang left. In fact, Su Guifei wanted to see her for her biological son and let Jingwan pass a message to her adopted son. However, after considering Lu Chengdi, she didn't do so. After all, even if she said that it was only because of her son's inner residence, no one would believe her. If she interfered too much and completely lost the emperor's heart, it would be troublesome. It was Jin Qin Wang's first time on an errand and his first time leaving the capital for an errand. The people sending him off couldn't be said to not be spectacular. However, when they saw Jin Qin Wang's huge amount of luggage, they were collectively speechless. Was he preparing to settle down in Jiangnan and not come back, or what? You're a big man, do you need to be so particular about it? His Majesty already said that you can eat, drink, and play as you please. Are you still afraid that you won't be able to live comfortably over there? These things naturally didn't belong to Li Hongyuan. More than 90% of them belonged to Jingwan. However, he really wasn't wrongly accused. According to Jingwan's idea, he could casually bring some and then bring enough money. Jiangnan was a land of wealth. There wasn't anything to eat or wear. If it wasn't to maintain the dignity of the Wangfu, she even wanted to bring money. As a result, Li Hongyuan's face turned stiff and he rejected it. For a man who threw the best things on his wife, those things really didn't enter his eyes. Even if there was something that he liked, he would just buy it when the time came. Jingwan was extremely speechless. However, for this kind of insignificant matter, if he was unyielding, she could only compromise in the end. Moreover, on this matter, the people who served her all stood on Wang Ye's side. She was all alone. Even when they reached the final place of farewell, they didn't see Jingwan coming down from the carriage. Everyone thought that Jin Qin Wang Fei was really deeply affectionate towards Jin Qin Wang. It wasn't easy for them to persuade, so they naturally targeted Luo Peishan, this biological grandfather. However, this old fox stroked his beard, unperturbed, and didn't say a word. Jin Qin Wang ordered to speed up and the entire procession started to run. Not a single shadow came down from his carriage. The people who stayed behind, "Are you sure that Jin Qin Wang Fei is in the carriage?" Someone asked, puzzled. "Naturally, I'm sure." "Then the close relative Wang Fei is going to Jiangnan with Jin Qin Wang." The group was in a mess. What was this? When a man went on an errand, as a wife, she didn't stay behind to take care of the family and followed along. What was this? Even if it was a general guarding the borders, he would at most bring a concubine to serve by his side. How could a dignified Wang Fei be so improper? Luo Daran doesn't want to say anything? Someone bombarded Luo Peishan. A married lady is like spilled water. She is now Jin Qin Wang Fei. This official has to greet her. What do you want this official to say? Luo Peishan brushed his sleeves and said, "So reasonable." So to say, Luo Daran already knew about this matter? If this official says that I know, you will definitely say that it is indeed so. If this official says that I don't know, you will definitely not believe it. Then, what do you want this official to say? This official still has matters to attend to and will return first. Everyone, please do as you wish. Luo Peishan elegantly got on his own carriage and left. Even if he was hopping mad, there was nothing he could do. Just as Luo Peishan said, he couldn't manage Jin Qin Wang Fei right now. Everyone, go back. Jin Qin Wang Fei brought it himself. His Majesty nodded in agreement. We don't need to meddle in other people's business. That's right. The matter is already a foregone conclusion. We can't chase Jin Qin Wang Fei back. Let's go, let's go. Jin Qin Wang Fei's agreement was inevitable, but when did His Majesty agree? Those who didn't understand were given a supercilious look. Idiot. Wasn't Lu Chengdi's words obvious? If Jin Qin Wang Fei was happy, as long as he didn't go overboard, he could do anything. It was just taking his wife to tour Jiangnan. Compared to finding trouble for others, it was nothing. On the other hand, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Things that didn't work with the living king of hell could be done through foreign diplomacy. Starting with Jin Qin Wang Fei, they might achieve unexpected results. Jin Qin Wang Fei wasn't soft-hearted towards others. How could he take care of his own wife? Bringing her along was enough to show how much he valued her. Thinking through this point, many people's minds became active again. Sure enough, when Lu Chengdi knew about the good deed Li Hongyuan did, he just waved his hand and didn't say anything. Only, those people who were lining up to have a heart-to-heart talk with Jing Wan didn't know what kind of expression they should show. This person wasn't in the capital, what was there to talk about? Those who could figure it out naturally waved their hands and let it go. Those who couldn't figure it out felt that they had been ruthlessly played and were furious. Thinking about the possible reactions of those people, Jing Wan was actually quite happy. Leaning in Li Hongyuan's arms, she laughed cheerfully. Just this little thing can make you this happy? If you can always laugh, that would be good. Jing Wan poked him. Don't say such a depressing thing now. People who have never fainted in a carriage don't know how uncomfortable it is. Actually, I have a way, maybe it can make Wan not feel uncomfortable, but also make the whole journey comfortable. Li Hongyuan said with a deeper meaning. What is it? Jing Wan looked up at him with interest, only to see his undisguised gaze. How could she not know what he wanted to do? She unhappily patted him. Don't even think about it. This carriage was surrounded by experts with sharp ears and eyes. It was fine if she was shameless in front of her own people, but in front of outsiders, even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to do such an extremely shameful thing as having sex in the carriage. Li Hongyuan pulled her into his arms, lowered his voice, and laughed softly in her ear. Wan doesn't have to make a sound. I've had people reinforce this carriage, so when it's moving, no one will be able to see it from outside. Does Wan really not want to try it? Maybe it really won't be uncomfortable at all. Shut up, Jing Wan said with some embarrassment. All right, Wan, whatever you say. However, as long as Wan needs it, this husband is always at your service. Jing Wan impolitely rolled her eyes at him. Even if she felt uncomfortable, she would never do such a thing. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows non-committally. When the time came, it would be good if she could really refuse. Li Hongyuan was still very confident about this, so he was not in a hurry now. Because there were many people around, Li Hongyuan didn't say anything important to Jing Wan. He just leaned on the bed and whispered in her ear. The outside of this carriage still didn't exceed the standard of a prince's carriage, but the inside was different. It was simply a small inner room. Although it was small, it had all the essentials. According to Jing Wan, it was a 100% caravan, and it was a luxurious and enhanced version. It strived to be comfortable and luxurious. As time passed, Jing Wan began to feel a little uncomfortable. She wanted to sleep but couldn't. Li Hongyuan knew that she felt uncomfortable, but it was the first time he felt it so close. Her healthy and rosy face turned pale, just like a healthy person who was gradually getting sick. Li Hongyuan's heart ached for her. He became irritable and didn't have the mood to joke. He just wanted to relieve her discomfort. Li Hongyuan held her face and kissed her without hesitation. After a short struggle, Jingwan began to cater to him. He knew that Jingwan was thin-skinned, and he didn't want a group of men to hear Jingwan's embarrassing moans. Even if he didn't kiss her, he would let Jingwan bite something. Jingwan didn't seem to forget the people outside. She seemed to be very tolerant. Her body was tense, and she was inexplicably excited. Li Hongyuan felt the change in her, and his irritable mood disappeared. He enjoyed this different kind of joy. Occasionally, he would tease Jingwan. "Are you still uncomfortable? Are you very comfortable?" Jingwan's face turned red, but she couldn't scold him. Probably because they didn't know what day it was. When they stopped, the carriage had also stopped. She didn't know how long they had been listening. Jingwan felt that she didn't have the face to see people. She wasn't sure that she didn't make a sound on the way. At the front of the carriage, there was a light knock on the door used to separate them. Gong Mama's voice came, "Wang Yi, is Wang Fei better? We've arrived at the post station. Do you want to rest before continuing? Wait a moment. Send in some warm water." "Yes." Gong Mama brought in 2 servant girls. Li Hongyuan quickly came out dressed neatly. No one could tell what had happened. But after being in the carriage for so long, his clothes were not messy at all. Unless he had been sitting upright the whole time. But was the king of hell that kind of person? So, if it was too tidy, it would be more conspicuous. Gong Mama brought the servant girls to help Jingwan freshen up. She whispered a few words to her, appeasing Jingwan's heart. In fact, it hadn't been long since they stopped, and there really wasn't any movement. It was only because they were familiar with it that they found some clues. Other people shouldn't know. Previously, they had told them that their Wang Fei would be uncomfortable sitting in the carriage for a long time. In fact, it wasn't just Jingwan's problem. Along the way, Jingwan didn't let them stop, and no one could point out anything. Jingwan heaved a sigh of relief. However, looking at Jingwan's current complexion, Gong Mama and the others were actually very happy. This was more comfortable than the sickly Wang Fei. Jin Qin Wang wanted to rest for an hour. No one could say anything. Even if they knew that they were in a hurry, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Jingwan was carried down by Li Hongyuan later. Her cloak was tightly covered, and the rooms in the post station had been changed thoroughly by the servant girls. Looking at the familiar things, this was the reason why a certain someone had to bring so many things. It was just resting for an hour. Was there a need to go through so much trouble? Was it to make some food and also to bring their own ingredients? Jingwan wasn't too sure. In a certain carriage, was there still ice to ensure the freshness of the vegetables and fruits? In fact, Jingwan later confirmed her thoughts. However, regarding these matters, a certain someone had always been obstinate. No matter how much she said, it was all in vain. Therefore, she could only take care of other people's emotions as much as possible, so that they would have as little complaints as possible. This was also human nature. Thus, a group of mortals enjoyed things that they couldn't even think of during the arduous journey. People in the Wangfu clearly expressed that this was Wang Fei's order. Thinking about Jin Qin Wang, he really didn't know how to conduct himself, so there was no need to doubt this point. In their hearts, it was not good to think about Jingwan anymore. The willful one was obviously Jin Qin Wang. Seeing that Jingwan had inadvertently bought people's hearts, Li Hongyuan indifferently looked at them. Each and every one of them should be deeply grateful to Wan Wan. After an hour, they quickly packed their things and prepared to leave. Jingwan inadvertently turned her head and saw some abandoned, disposable things. Li Hongyuan ordered people to burn them. The things that his wife had used were not things that other people could use. Jingwan was completely powerless. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. After that, the journey was relatively smooth. When they got on the boat, they sped up and didn't slow down the overall time. https://www Bicken. com/11/11807/6653467. HTML chapter error. Click here to report, exempt from registration. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Biku Gur mobile reading website bicken.com. Chapter 276. All in all, in just a few days, everyone more or less had an understanding. Jean Qinhuang Fei was really a good person. How could she marry such a slag like Jean Qinhuang? Those who had this thought, not only the people from other factions, but also Jean Qinhuang's people. Jean Qinhuang's ability was beyond doubt. Those who had seen it all thought that he was the most suitable heir to the throne. However, with such a strong master, you might not be able to keep up with his thinking speed. Once your reaction was slow, he would look at you as if you were an idiot, making you feel ashamed and want to die. At one point, you would doubt your previous life. And Li Hongyuan's nature was cold and ruthless, without any mercy, and his methods were bloody. In fact, those who worked for him, as time passed, their understanding of him deepened and they all had faint worries in their hearts. It was just that no one dared to easily break this layer of worry. Perhaps they were deceiving themselves and didn't want to admit it. After having a female master, knowing her temperament, understanding her character, and more importantly, knowing that the master cared about her and was able to listen to her advice, there was really nothing more joyous than this. Under normal circumstances, a woman's influence on the emperor was too great. This was absolutely not what the officials wanted to see. However, if the emperor had extraordinary ability, but was essentially a tyrant, and this woman could influence the emperor's thoughts and even make decisions, she was fundamentally righteous and could distinguish right from wrong. Then, this kind of combination was actually a happy sight. Along the way, those who worked for Li Hongyuan, whether it was in the open or in the dark, saw everything and were gratified. The hidden worries in their hearts also gradually faded, until they completely disappeared. Naturally, they gave Jingwan more respect from their hearts. At the same time, it also imperceptibly influenced other people's view of Jingwan. As for the point that Jean Qinhuang Fei was a jealous woman, she did those things, but it didn't affect her relationship with Jean Qinhuang. Just thinking about it, one should know that this wasn't Jean Qinhuang Fei's problem alone. Without Jean Qinhuang Fei's connivance, how could Jean Qinhuang Fei, as his wife, be so unscrupulous? Not to mention that a jealous empress would affect the emperor's children. If the empress was unhappy and continued to tie the emperor down, then there was no need to talk about the future. The emperor himself would collapse the country first. Then what was the use of having more children? It was said that the more children one had, the more blessings one would have. But in reality, with so many sons, how many of them would be able to live a life full of blessings, peace, and happiness? It was clearly a case of brothers quarreling and falling apart. More of them were fighting to the death. 10 dozen good-for-nothings who only cared about benefits couldn't even compare to an outstanding successor. A rational person would believe that quality was more important than quantity, even if it was a son. Well, it was still too early to talk about this now. After all, these variables could exist at any time. It was useless to think too much about it. The most important thing was what was in front of him. Li Hongyuan couldn't help but smile when he saw the changes in the people around him. Some people's worries weren't groundless. He was well aware of his current nature. Without Jingwan, there was a 90% chance that he would act recklessly and, as Master Liaochen had said, cause misery and suffering to the people. He left behind a paradise only because she was in this land. Right now, he was laying the groundwork bit by bit to increase her leverage and push her to the highest position so that Wan's influence would grow. In the future, when he ascended to the throne, the court officials wouldn't urge him to expand the harem and have more children. Instead, they would do the opposite and urge him to favor only one woman. If he failed a woman like the Empress, the heavens would not tolerate it. Regardless of whether it was out of sincerity or because they were worried that he would act recklessly without restraints, as long as he could reach this point, For him, it might be a greater achievement than creating a golden age. The mighty fleet moved forward on the canal. Everywhere it passed, all the boats moved aside. Li Hongyuan acted like a tyrant. There was no need to talk about keeping a low profile or investigating in secret. Everywhere he went, it was clear to everyone that he, Li Hongyuan, the current Qin Huang, the imperial envoy appointed by the emperor, had arrived. Some people wanted to ask, with such great fanfare, what could they find? They were afraid that all the evidence of their crimes had been covered up. If they colluded with each other, they would return empty-handed. Someone had given him advice, but Li Hongyuan didn't listen at all and continued to do as he pleased. Originally, the most luxurious boat in the fleet was his and Jingwan's. The rest of the people, except for Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen, were all from Jin Qin Wang Fu. There were originally a lot of people, but after they were placed on the boat, it was actually very empty. As for whether the other people on the boat would be pitifully squeezed together, that was not within his scope of concern. As the main entourage, if they wanted to board the boat to talk to him, they had to obtain his consent. If he was tired of hearing it, he would forbid them from boarding the boat. Thus, the others could only stand on another boat and watch Li Hongyuan standing at the highest point, so free and easy and comfortable. They could only silently cry in the wind. Therefore, Jin Qinhuang's temper became better. That was definitely an illusion. It was only because Jin Qinhuang Fei was there as a buffer, so he didn't find fault. Wang Fei, you're really a good person. Then, can you help a bit? But it was very embarrassing. Jingwan couldn't hear their inner voices. Moreover, on official matters, she believed that he must have a plan and had a card up his sleeve. Therefore, no matter what he did now, she wouldn't say anything. Instead, she was full of character and had people prepare iron plates for barbecue. On a sunny day, the wind was blowing in their faces. On the deck, a specially built iron plate barbecue rack was set up. All kinds of food was skewered and piled into a small mountain. During the barbecue process, the aroma spread and the gluttonous worms in their stomachs became active. When they were in Qian Fu, Mei Lan, Zhu Ju, Zhu Mei, 4 people's barbecue skills had been trained to be excellent. In addition, Hei Mei and Bai Xiao, who were born with full skills in this aspect, could learn it after learning it once. Moreover, the cooks brought out from the Wang Fu weren't just for show. For them, this thing didn't require any skill. Jingwan only needed to open her mouth and wait to eat. Jingwan's cooking skills weren't very good, but she thought that barbecue was pretty good. She intended to let her husband have a taste of her cooking. Considering that a certain someone was a carnivore, Jingwan didn't make things difficult for him this time. She barbecued a few skewers of whole meat and sent them to Li Hongyuan. Try it. With a little hope. After all, a certain someone's mouth was so picky. Who knew if the food she made could be eaten by him? Li Hongyuan found it funny. Everyone, including his wife, thought that he was the most delicate, and didn't use anything that wasn't the best. Li Hongyuan took a bite from Jingwan's hand and tasted it carefully. It tastes good. Jingwan smiled happily. It was so sincere and natural. Just because of such a small matter, Jingwan gradually became more humane to some extent. In the past, she was ruled by reason most of the time. But after marrying Li Hongyuan, there weren't many times when she needed to be calm and rational. Wan made it. Even if it's poison, your husband will still eat it. Li Hongyuan's sweet words seemed to be a little ineffective at this moment, because Jingwan's face immediately fell. So, it's because the person who made it makes you think it tastes good, and not because it itself makes you think it's good? So, the things I make are still difficult for people to eat? Li Hongyuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His little sweetheart was actually fussing about this. She was grasping the wrong point. Li Hongyuan took the skewer from her hand and pinched her face. It's not that bad. In fact, the taste is really good. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. With that said, he took the skewer and ate it unhurriedly. Jingwan slapped his hand away. You're not allowed to pinch my face. I'm not a child. I'll try it. After tasting it, Jingwan was satisfied and unceremoniously stuffed everything in her hand to Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed with ridicule. Say that you're not a child, don't be so childish. His wife was spoiled to the point that her mind regressed. As a man who pampered his wife, this was definitely a great achievement. People who were used to the two people getting along with each other were used to this scene. For people who met for the first time, such as Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen, although they still had a paralyzed face, their hearts were somewhat shocked. This was poles apart from the Jin Qinhuang they were familiar with. If Jin Qinhuang's temperament had always been like this, other things were hard to say, but one thing was certain. That was, the number of women in Jin Qinhuang Fu was definitely not in the minority. Jingwan reached out and secretly poked Li Hongyuan's arm, giving the two door gods a meaningful look. Anyone who could distract his wife, in Li Hongyuan's eyes, was an enemy. His eyes darkened, but it wasn't good to continue looking for nourishment from his wife. Playing around with trivial matters, sooner or later his wife would no longer fall for this. Then, he could only let others bear it. Turning back, you guys also eat a bit. The two men inexplicably felt a little chilly. Many thanks to Wang Ye. Originally, there were several barbecue grills prepared. Now, it was enough for the servant girls to use one just to serve Jingwan and Li Hongyuan. Barbecue was, in essence, just for fun. Now, perhaps it could add a novelty. Everyone's appetite was not bad. Li Hongyuan also let people get good wine. The taste was really wonderful. With outsiders present, Li Hongyuan didn't pull Jingwan to be lovey-dovey. He lazily half-leaned on the recliner and let Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen sit down, casually chatting. There was a lot of cooked food on the tray at hand. The skewers left behind would be quickly taken away, but they didn't know how much had been eaten. Oh! Li Suyen, how many black-clothed guards did you bring out? They were still chatting a moment ago, but Li Hongyuan's last sentence was abrupt. Li Suyen subconsciously wanted to blurt out, but inadvertently saw Li Hongyuan's lazy but ruthless eyes looking at him from the corner of his eyes. He paused, answering Wang Ye, 100 people. Yu Zhongqing's hand movements paused. That day in the imperial court, the emperor clearly said 50 people, but the actual number was doubled. What was the meaning of this? Speaking of the black-clothed guards, Li Suyen brought 50 people on the surface, but this was only half of the number. Even Yu Zhongqing didn't see all of them. Li Hongyuan's expression didn't change at all. He just divided the extra 50 people into groups of 5 and sent them to 10 different places. It was obviously an important matter, but he seemed to be saying that the weather was good today. Li Suyen's task was to assist Li Hongyuan. He didn't need to have his own ideas. He only needed to carry out orders unconditionally. Yes. At this moment, people who were hiding in unknown places left their groups to carry out their tasks. These people were good at reconnaissance, arrest, and interrogation. This time, they were secretly collecting information. However, there must be something in common, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Even if it was difficult, they had to do their best to complete it, and it had to be perfect. After completing such a small task, Li Hongyuan seemed to have lost his interest. After all, it wasn't mealtime yet, so his stomach wasn't that hungry. These people naturally didn't have the habit of overeating. They just continued to drink and occasionally ate a little as a side dish. They didn't want to eat here, but the people on the surrounding boats were in pain. The smell was too fragrant, but they could only smell it. They couldn't see nor eat it. It couldn't be helped. The King of Hell's boat was the tallest and largest. The closer they were, the less they could see the situation on the deck. Of course, it wasn't only the people who were attracted by it. Seeing that they were about to arrive at Kaming Prefecture, more and more boats gathered on the canal. Kaming Prefecture was a very important prefecture before entering Jiangnan. At the same time, it was also the capital of Tongzhou County. It could be said that it had already entered the boundary of the wooden target this time. This place wasn't within the scope of investigation. However, if Li Hongyuan went crazy and started from here, he wouldn't be able to clean himself up. Therefore, this place was not only prosperous, but also on the main road. It was developed not only by water, but also by land. It was obvious that it was absolutely not to be underestimated. "Master, there's still an hour before we reach Kaming Prefecture." Ani stepped forward and said in a low voice, "Stop the fleet at Kaming Ferry. After lunch, wait for me to take a nap before disembarking." Li Hongyuan said in a light voice, "Yes." For the many officials waiting at the ferry to light candles, it would be 2.5 hours later. Those were officials of second rank and below. What governor, administrator, inspector, and so on. Knowing that the prince had graced them with his presence, and because of his identity as the imperial envoy, no one dared to neglect him. Moreover, because this time's matter was too big, they had already received the news long ago. And this imperial envoy was naturally the first person they paid attention to. There was no need for them to inquire. The capital had already sent a list of all the key personnel over at top speed. Their temperament and preferences were all explained. Among these people, there were naturally people they were familiar with. These were all not important. As the imperial envoy, Jin Qinhuang had a few pages of introduction to him. Seeing this lord's great achievements, how many people's foreheads were dripping with sweat. And those who were familiar with Li Hongyuan were almost paralyzed. Then, after confirming that they didn't commit any crimes, they slightly breathed a sigh of relief. But they were still on tenterhooks. This person had never played his cards according to common sense. Who knew whether or not he would become the fish in the moat that would be affected by the fire at the city gates. All kinds of explanations were exchanged. No matter if they were political enemies or allies, they all complained incessantly. Why did His Majesty pick this person? Was there no one else in the imperial court? And for those who didn't know, the more they understood, the more they felt that it was strange. Was that a ferocious bird or beast? Or did he have 3 heads and 6 arms? They hadn't seen him yet, but the people who usually had the virtue of being the lord and lousy were so scared that they trembled like quails. Without a doubt, their own legs and stomachs also trembled. The reputation of the living king of hell was simply demonized. So much so that for a time, they neglected the part about Jingwan. Of course, it could also be that Jingwan was a female. Even if they wanted to use roundabout tactics, it wasn't good to write down her temperament and preferences too clearly. Otherwise, if the living king of hell knew about it, they would be torn apart one by one. In addition, to a certain extent, Jin Qinhuang also specialized in dealing with debauches. Because no matter what kind of debauchee you were, in front of him, you had to lie down on your stomach. Based on this point, these Darren didn't lack in exhortations to their own evil creatures. During Jin Qinhuang's stay, they must not cause trouble. It would be best if they didn't even leave the door. Otherwise, if they offended him, no one could save them. It must be known that the second generation of these places were even more lawless than the princes in the capital. They didn't care much about their own father's words. Only when they really fell into Li Hongyuan's hands, each and every one of them regretted until their intestines turned green. Only then did they know that compared to this one, they were actually nothing. Because the momentum was too great, the entire ferry was cleared. The common people of Kai Ming Fu all knew that something big was going to happen today and stood on their tiptoes from afar, craning their necks to watch. When the fleet arrived at the ferry, there was no need for any special explanation. All the officials knew that the main character had arrived. At first glance, they knew that it wasn't a ship that ordinary people could use. 3 floors, luxurious and imposing. The edge of each deck was densely packed with majestic guards armed with swords. Just by feeling, they knew that those weren't just for show, but had really seen blood. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion that this was indeed Jin Qinhuang's style. Obviously, they had never seen Jin Qinhuang's style before. The ships at the side spontaneously and consciously moved to the sides, emptying the middle position. The big ship steadily stopped. As early as when they saw the fleet, the officials on the shore quieted down. As they approached, they lowered their eyes and bowed their heads, putting on a respectful attitude, respectfully welcoming Jin Qinhuang's arrival. It was just that it had been almost a quarter of an hour and they still didn't see the slightest movement. They couldn't help but quietly raise their heads. As a result, the same as when the ship stopped, it was still the same now. They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was going on? This main ship didn't move, the other ships naturally didn't dare to act blindly without thinking, and they were also at a loss. This wait lasted for 2 seconds. These people were also pampered and pampered. Adding that it was already lunchtime, their bodies seemed to be somewhat swaying. In the end, they couldn't bear it and prepared to send someone to ask. The person who received the order secretly cursed his bad luck, but he had to bite the bullet. The people on the ship couldn't be provoked, and these people also couldn't be provoked. However, when that person dawdled forward, there was a movement on the ship first. The wooden plank to disembark the ship was quickly set up. A man who was missing an important part walked down and stood arrogantly in front of everyone. His voice was quite sharp as he opened. "Darren, Master is currently having lunch and will take a nap later. Master's intention is, if you are impatient from waiting, you can go back first. This kind of trivial matter, Master said that he won't bother with you." Finished speaking, Mu Gonggong turned and walked away. These people's faces were called wonderful. This was clearly giving them a show of strength. Even if he was a Qin Wang, wasn't this a bit too much? Did he really think that they didn't have a temper? Well, so what if they had a temper? Didn't they still have to endure it? Go back. This kind of face talk was over. If the main character didn't come down, they could only wait with an empty stomach. Castrated dog. Someone cursed at Mu Gonggong's back. Since they couldn't scold Qin Wang, they naturally took their anger out on others. Mu Gonggong's attitude was really infuriating. He was just a lackey, yet he dared to speak to them like this. It was simply, even if he was a dog, he was Qin Wang's dog. He was a dog that relied on its master's power. You people who were usually high up in the air, other than using your glib tongue, really couldn't do anything to him. Mu Gonggong was ordered to draw hatred. People like him had a master by his side. Without a master's order, they really didn't dare to act casually. Speaking of which, it wasn't only them who suffered, the people accompanying them were also the same. Previously, their sense of smell had been ruthlessly poisoned. They swallowed their saliva as they endured. They thought that when they reached Kai Ming Fu and got off the ship, they would have a good meal and soon forget this kind of torture. As a result, even though they were clearly on the shore, they still had to continue squatting on the ship to gnaw on dry food and drink plain water. At the same time, they couldn't help but think about how delicious Qin Wang's table was. The more they thought about it, the harder it was to swallow. They clearly wanted to restrain themselves from thinking about it, but they couldn't do it. Was there still justice? Jing Wan, who was sitting next to Li Hongyuan, also thought the same. "You say, how bored were you to do this kind of thing?" Li Hongyuan picked up some food and placed it in her bowl. Unconcerned, he opened his mouth. Presumably, along the way, the reputation of the living king of hell will become more and more well known. Naturally, I have to let them know that this is not just in name but also in reality. Let them be tense at all times. If they relax, it will be more difficult for me. Could he not use this kind of tone and say such infuriating words? At this time, Jing Wan also didn't get involved. What she should do on a normal day, she should do it now. Her purpose for coming out was to play. Li Hongyuan did what he said. He hugged Jing Wan and took a comfortable afternoon nap. Only then did he give the order to prepare to get off the ship. And the officials on the shore even felt that they were about to ascend to heaven. Of course, this was definitely an illusion. They finally received the confirmation that Qin Wang was going to get off the ship. The people on the other ships wiped their foreheads and quickly got off the ship in an orderly manner. They stood at the side of the empty space and respectfully welcomed him together with the others. The imperial bodyguards on the big ship were divided into 2 rows. They calmly and silently got off the ship and lined up on the shore on both sides. The long-awaited Qin Wang finally appeared. Although it was disrespectful to look at him directly at this time, but, with so many people, probably no one would notice if they secretly took a glance. But, there were too many people who thought this way. Therefore, in Li Hongyuan's eyes, all the officials of Kai Ming Fu appeared shifty. Li Hongyuan was dissatisfied with these people. And because of that glance, These people were shocked. They seemed to have just remembered that the information also said that Jin Qin was the most handsome man in the capital. Almost all of them ignored this. Although the faces of the officials of Qi Yuan also needed to be proper, but this was enough. A big man, what face did they care about? However, after seeing Li Hongyuan, they finally understood what the concept of the most handsome man was and how graceful he was. Although he wasn't wearing the imperial robe of a prince, he wore a jade crown on his head, a black brocade robe with dark patterns and golden thread at the edges. His handsome face, cold eyes, noble, dignified, and aloof. This kind of person occupied all the glory and favor. He was born to be in a superior position. Even if they knew of his fierce reputation, it was difficult to have a bad impression at the first moment. But the woman beside him was only a step behind. She was also dignified and unruffled. Standing beside Jin Qin, she also appeared peerless. Without a doubt, she should be Jin Qin Fei. In such a solemn occasion, Jin Qin brought her with him. It could be seen that he only valued her. He slightly regretted that he didn't look carefully at the information about this Wang Fei. Li Hongyuan brought Jing Wan and slowly walked down. Behind them were Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen. Behind them were his personal bodyguards and personal maidservants. Ignoring the carriage prepared by the officials of Kai Ming Fu, in just a moment, his luxurious caravan was moved down from the ship and put on the horse harness. Before getting on the carriage, Li Hongyuan looked at the 4 horses with disdain, as if he was looking at the most useless waste. Using these things to send Ben Wang off, they really give Ben Wang face. The governor and the inspector governor standing at the front couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. These 4 horses were carefully selected. Although they weren't the best horses in Kai Ming Fu, but the 4 horses were very similar in size, height, and hair. At first glance, one would even think that they were the same horse. There was nothing more suitable than them to pull the carriage. It must be known that as their owner, when he knew that they were used to pull the carriage, his heart ached terribly. But now, they were disliked to this extent. If one really wanted to use the best BMW, it was absolutely impossible to find 4 of the same kind. Moreover, who would waste God's gift by using a BMW to pull the carriage? Wang Ye, this concubine quite likes these 4 horses. I can also see Darren's sincerity and effort. Jingwan smiled. Li Hongyuan's expression softened a little. Since Wang Fei says so, then forget it. Waiting for the 2 to sit down, Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen rode their horses, one on the left and one on the right of the carriage. In front, there were 2 teams of guards leading the way, and behind them, there were even more guards. The other officials either mounted their horses or got on the carriage, scrambling to keep up. The temporary residence prepared for Li Hongyuan was the governor's luxurious courtyard. This place was envied by many people, and once again, Jin Qin disliked it. The huge amount of luggage they had brought with them was moved down nimbly, and the courtyard was once again changed into a brand new one. Before, they thought that Jin Qin was purely looking for trouble, but now, they maintained their silence. In terms of luxury, in terms of fastidiousness, who could compare to Jin Qin? Sure enough, in this aspect, no one should think of bribing him. Even if you took out all your belongings, in his eyes, it was nothing. Such beauties? Thinking of Jin Qin Fei who had already gone to the inner courtyard, thinking of the beauties that Jin Qin kept that were comparable to the emperor's harem, as the information said, it really seemed unlikely. One by one, they wanted to worm their way into being friends with him, but Li Hongyuan was not in the mood, and did not allow them to say anything. Helpless, they could only take a step back, indicating that there would be a banquet in the evening to welcome Jin Qin. Li Hongyuan sneered, "Do you all have a lot of money? Then, can Ben Wang start investigating from you? Why does Wang Ye say this?" Sure enough, after looking at him a few more times, his nature was even more frightening. Li Hongyuan coolly looked at the governor. This broken courtyard, Ben Wang does not fancy it, but the cost of construction probably exceeds your net worth, right? You set up a banquet. What good things can you take out to entertain Ben Wang? Ben Wang is not in the mood to care about you. Scram as far as you can. If I don't summon you, don't come in front of Ben Wong. Since he had already said this, who would dare to continue to stay? Outside the door, you look at me, I look at you, their mouths seemed to be filled with coptis. Their hearts were also beating wildly, hard to calm down. Living king of hell, sure enough, there was only a wrong name, but not a wrong nickname. This kind of person, how to please? Could it be that they had to show that their sleeves were clean, just and upright? This person was also not someone who would fall for this. After all, at the place where Jin Qin Wang had stayed before, the officials learned their lesson and acted in the opposite way, pretending to be poor. As a result, Jin Qin Wang directly confiscated their property, and if it was more than what they said, they were charged with the crime of deceiving the monarch. Without saying anything, they were directly sent to prison. After that, if they did their best to serve him, they could relax a bit. Jin Qin Wang Fei. It seems that this is the only way. If Jin Qin Wang Fei does not meet, or if Jin Qin Wang does not allow them to meet, what should we do? We can't just sit and wait for death, but if there is a possibility, we have to try. He should not stay here for too long, after all, those students cannot be delayed. Jin Qin Wang is not an ordinary person. Naturally, we cannot infer with common sense. Who knows if he will make an example out of Ming Fu, killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Therefore, the more they spoke, the more uncertain they became. Have you all cleaned up your hands? The governor asked half obscurely. Someone smiled bitterly. How could it be so easy? Some things were not so easy to clean up after they had been done. As long as they investigated to the end, they would definitely be exposed. Jin Qin Wang had a black-clothed guard by his side, and there were a bunch of capable people. Some might help you hide it, but more people wanted to turn your background inside out. Therefore, it really could not withstand a serious investigation. We have to stabilize ourselves. We can't be his target. It is important to think of a way to send this god of plague away, if we can't. The governor's face showed a ruthless expression. Everyone's heart shivered. Unless it was a last resort, no one wanted to take this step. Everyone disperse. The governor waved his hand and left first. The others left one after another. In the other courtyard, Li Hongyuan gently looked at the table, as if thinking about something. Master, the matter has been settled. An E came in from outside and reported respectfully. Li Hongyuan nodded his head indifferently. https://www.bicon.com/11/11807/6653470. HTML. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book. www.bicon.com. Biku Gur mobile reading website. Bicon.com. Chapter 277. No one would ask what Li Hongyuan sent people to do. This was not within their scope of authority. As to whether to report to Lu Chengdi or not, that was their business. So, they all thought at the same time, did he not avoid the taboo? No matter if it was Yu Zhongqing or Li Suyen, they were all experts and would not show their emotions on their faces. It was just that Yu Zhongqing felt that his master who had just assumed office not long ago, did he also take Li Suyen under his command? If so, he would not find it strange. This master's position, compared to the other princes, was much higher. This also explained why he did not avoid the taboo. Of course, this was only his guess. If not, he might be exposed in front of the emperor in the future. So what? As early as when he chose a new master, he already had this awareness. Li Suyen's thinking was slightly different. He did not hide anything from Lu Chengdi. The premise was that it was within his scope of responsibility or was related to him. His task this time was to listen to Jin Qin Wang's orders. Everything else naturally had nothing to do with him. In his view, Li Hongyuan did this either because he did not have a guilty conscience or deliberately did it for them to see. Therefore, the two of them could be said to be Lu Chengdi's left and right arms. There was no tacit understanding to speak of. They were once loyal to Lu Qingdi, but the number of contact was pitifully little. In the end, it was because Lu Qingdi's guard was too heavy. Even if they were his confidants, he did not let them come in contact. Li Hongyuan went to the rear residence. Even Yu Zhongqing, who needed to be close to protect him, would not be an eyesore at this time. Jingwan was quite surprised that Li Hongyuan could tolerate Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen, who were like shadow followers and basically never left his side. Li Hongyuan's explanation was that their existence was similar to that of bodyguards. It was not considered as tolerance. Of course, the so-called similar had nothing to do with trust. Although one would not get dizzy on a boat, it would not be as comfortable as walking on solid ground, unless it was someone who walked outside all year round. Jingwan felt a little tired and needed a good night's sleep to adjust. At this time, he truly felt the benefits of a certain someone's insistence on bringing so much luggage. They were all things that he was used to, so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable using them. This kind of thing, everyone should have experienced. When something was replaced with a new one, it required a process of readaptation. It could be long or short. If it was not as good as the original, one would involuntarily feel different degrees of disdain. When people were tired, they didn't have to experience this feeling. It couldn't be better to be in a comfortable state. Li Hongyuan was considerate and did not torture her, nor did he do anything else. They hugged each other and went to sleep early. Li Hongyuan probably knew that those people would inquire about his whereabouts, so he didn't deliberately hide it. Therefore, when the group of people learned that he had slept with the princess, they couldn't help but look at each other. Even they, who were busy with government affairs, didn't sleep so early, let alone those who had rich nightlife. Even if Jin Qinhuang would not be easily moved by beauty, wasn't it normal for him to relax a bit? Thus, he continued to make discreet inquiries, and the results were not disappointing. The princess consort was not feeling well. So, Jin Qinhuang really loved Jin Qinhuang Fei very much. However, since Jin Qinhuang Fei was not feeling well, then it was natural for his foreign to pay a visit. Jingwan didn't know that her own husband had found trouble for her again. The whole morning was as usual. Li Hongyuan looked at his wife's sweat like rain. That flexible figure, he really couldn't get tired of looking at it 100 times. With regards to Li Hongyuan's teasing, Jingwan also bluntly retorted, Wang Ye should pay more attention. If one day the flesh on your body grows soft, or even a big belly, remember to send someone to sleep in the study. If you don't recover, don't think about returning to your room. Jingwan's words, if it was someone who only had the relationship of husband and wife, the other party would probably leave in a huff and tell her that there were many women who were willing to sleep with him. Of course, they were only husband and wife and didn't have any feelings. Jingwan also wouldn't say something that was purely a joke. Would Wan really be so heartless? This husband really wants to give it a try. Thinking about the incomparably handsome king of hell turning into a fat man with a big belly, even if Jingwan wasn't someone who cared about appearances, just thinking about that image made her eyes stinging. Well, jokes were jokes. Even if he really became like that, she couldn't really drive him out. Not because of the other party's identity, not because he was her husband, but because he was her lover. Although it hadn't reached 100%, but Jingwan knew that if it continued like this, it would happen sooner or later. Unless he went to sleep with another woman now, she wouldn't be able to extricate herself. Okay, if Wang Ye wants to try, how about this concubine also try? Li Hongyuan rubbed his chin with interest. Wan's husband singing and wife following suit, my heart is very comforted. This husband is also looking forward to Wan's fleshy body. That taste should also be quite wonderful. He even deliberately swept the tip of his tongue across his lips, as if he couldn't wait to have a taste. That look in his eyes also seemed to want to peel off Jingwan's skin. Jingwan was speechless. Facing this bastard, she could only be defeated. She casually threw the handkerchief she used to wipe her sweat over. Not only did he not dislike it, but he also deliberately sniffed it twice and narrowed his eyes slightly. He seemed to be enjoying it, as if he wanted to have her sweat. Jingwan's body inexplicably trembled. She simply ended it in advance and left. But she heard the bastard's wanton laughter. Sure enough, the king of hell was the king of hell. No matter who he met, he was more than a level higher. Li Hongyuan's original purpose was to bring Jingwan out to have fun. He had been in a hurry in the beginning because he didn't want to hear the urgent nagging of the emperor. Wan would definitely not have a good time. But now, since he was already on the verge of it, there was no need to hurry. He would stay in Kaming Mansion for 10 days to half a month and visit the surrounding areas. Therefore, those who couldn't wait for Li Hongyuan to leave quickly would be so angry that they would vomit 3 liters of blood if they knew about this. Nanny Gong and the others had already known Li Hongyuan's purpose, so they had basically prepared everything to go out. After breakfast, they rested for a while. Jingwan saw a man who looked to be in his early 30s. His skin was darker than ordinary people. At first glance, he looked like a person who worked outside all year round. Jingwan was quite curious about why her husband specially asked such a person to come here. However, Jingwan found that this person seemed to be more respectful to her than to the king of hell. Generally speaking, when the couple sat together and greeted each other, it was enough for them to bow to each other. However, he bowed to each other separately. When he bowed to each other, he especially turned to one side. It was obvious that he was bowing to her. Jingwan was very sure that she had never seen this person before. Then why did he behave like this? He is the one who got one of the 10 purses from Great Elder Princess. He is also the one you specially sent to teach him. Now he works in the Ministry of War and cooperates with you in drawing the geomantic map. Jingwan's eyes lit up. That's the one. He's practically traveled all over Qiyuan Empire and has also set foot in many neighboring countries. His memory is also very outstanding. Basically, there's no place that he can't remember, including the characteristics and terrain. He can remember everything clearly. He is like a living geomantic map. Your Highness, you flatter me. The living geomantic map said modestly. Li Hongyuan glanced at him and was a little unhappy. Your Highness, you remember it clearly. Jingwan grabbed Li Hongyuan excitedly and did not notice his strange behavior at the moment. Ah Yuan, thank you. How could she not know that he specially brought this person out for her? To be honest, no one could be so considerate as this man, not even her grandmother, could be so considerate. Li Hongyuan's eyes softened when he saw her beaming with joy. She even called him a nickname that she only used in private when there were outsiders present. Since she was so happy, he did not want to dampen her spirits. He reluctantly treated the living geomantic map as a dead one. Moreover, their first impression of the living geomantic map was exactly the same. It's good that you are happy. I think that with him, we should be able to have more fun. Jingwan nodded. That was right. This map was more useful than the electronic version of the map. It was simply a must-have for traveling. After the excitement, Jingwan became more reserved and began to chat with the living geomantic map. For a moment, she forgot that someone was a minefield. She immediately paused and said, I don't know your surname. If he was called the living geomantic map, it would be rude. Your Highness, you are too polite. My surname is Shi. The living geomantic map hurriedly responded. Jingwan felt that he seemed a little nervous. Oh, it's Mr. Shi. Speaking of which, Prince used public resources for private purposes because of me this time. I hope that it won't delay Mr. Shi's business. Your Highness is too serious. To be able to contribute to Your Highness, this official feels honored. These words were not false. Originally, in the entire group, the others were selected by others. Only he was personally selected by Li Hongyuan. Originally, he was busy and because his knowledge was put to use, he was preparing to show off his skills. Suddenly, he had to go on a business trip. His mood was not very good. However, he did not have the right to refuse and could only sullenly follow along. It was only when he knew that his benefactor, Jin Qin Wang Fei, was also present that his mood subsided. Previously, when he found out that Jin Qin Wang Fei was going on a trip and needed him to lead the way, the last bit of sullenness completely disappeared. Speaking of which, Wang Fei's grace is like a new life. I have long wanted to thank Wang Fei in person, but I never had the chance. I was deeply afraid that I would offend Wang Fei and did not dare to pay you a visit. Having this opportunity is truly the fortune of 3 lifetimes. What does Princess Consort want to know? I will tell you everything I know in the next pass. Sure, Darren doesn't need to be like this. The matter at that time was just a coincidence. My original intention was to contribute to the Qi Yuan dynasty. I only hope that the Qi Yuan dynasty will prosper. If it wasn't you, it would be someone else. Therefore, Sure Darren really doesn't need to care. No matter what the prefix was, as long as it was related to the word affection, Jingwan did not want this affection to be too deep and heavy to bear. I don't know anything. I want to learn something, but it's useless. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't learn it. Don't talk about disappointing my family and clan. Don't even talk about my career. Almost everyone looked at this official as if they were looking at a piece of trash. This official was once dispirited and gave up on myself. If it wasn't for Wang Fei's people who came to my door and exhausted their efforts, that purse would not have landed in this official's hands. How would I be able to enter the Ministry of War? This official was placed in an important position. My parents were gratified and my wife was happy. This official could confidently talk to my children about the magnificent mountains and rivers of Qi Yuan. No one would say that those things were useless and would only say that it was amazing. Furthermore, the way my children looked at me was also filled with respect. At the same time, my family's status in the clan also rose. Wang Fei was the first to acknowledge the things that I had denied. She even used this as a way to embark on a completely different life. How could I forget such kindness? Not only this official, but the entire family also wishes to kowtow to Wang Fei in person to express our gratitude. After all, Wang Fei was already precious when you were still in the boudoir. Now, you are even more precious. Other than a word of thanks, there's really nothing I can do to repay you. Living Geomancy Map spoke with sincerity. Jingwan sighed softly and did not know what to say. In fact, Jingwan knew a little about this official situation. In order to make better use of that purse, there were some things that needed to be clarified. However, she only heard about it from Nanny Gong. What she heard was only the general situation. Now it seemed that it was not so easy to just change the owner of the purse. Thinking about it, it made sense. The opportunity to show one's face in front of His Majesty might lead to a bright future. It was not so easy to give it away. Therefore, the person that Nanny Gong sent out to persuade her was also a talent. Li Hongyuan gently pinched Jingwan's mouth. Whatever Wang Fei says is what it is. There's no need to say anything else. If Wang Fei has a good time on this trip to Jiangnan, I will count it as a great merit. He did not hide his purpose at all. Not far away, Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen lowered their eyebrows and narrowed their eyes. They held the hilts of the sabers at their waists and stood straight like wooden pillars. It was as if they did not hear anything. This official will do his best. In order to have a good time, Jingwan was determined to travel light. It was still a mighty group of people. Others could tell at a glance that they were not ordinary people. Not clearing the area was the same as clearing the area, but there would be no atmosphere. Of course, Jingwan also knew that their identities were special. It was impossible for them to be like ordinary people. Her request was only to make them look like a rich young master taking his wife out on a trip. It was enough. There must be a lot of hidden guards. She knew very well that on this trip to Jiangnan, her husband had blocked many paths. If he was really impartial, many people would suffer. Who could guarantee that these people would not take the risk? Compared to Li Hongyuan's life and wealth, sightseeing was nothing. What Jingwan could think of, Li Hongyuan could naturally also think of. Moreover, with Wan by his side, he naturally had to be foolproof. He could not even affect Jingwan's sightseeing. The arrangements could not be incomplete. No matter how relaxed he looked on the surface, it could not be denied that he did things in secret. After having people deal with the people who were watching around the courtyard, the group of people went out through the back door. It was obvious that if those officials knew, not long after they went out, there would be one chance encounter after another. The sightseeing could be stopped. Not only did they prepare a carriage, they also prepared horses. It was not that they were worried that Jingwan would be uncomfortable sitting in the carriage for too long. She would not stay in the carriage for too long for sightseeing. It was just that, in some places, it was more fun to ride a horse. At this time, the carriage and the servants followed behind the two people walking hand in hand. The guards on both sides slightly opened the way for them. The living map historian was 2 steps behind Jingwan to the left. He explained the cultural and historical characteristics of the Kaming mansion to Jingwan. As Jingwan walked, her attention was almost attracted. The living king of hell expressed his displeasure, but he had to admit that the living geomancy map was indeed amazing in this aspect. To say that he was a living geomancy map was actually a disgrace. Even Li Hongyuan himself was attracted by it, so he suppressed his displeasure and multitasked. While listening, he led the way for his wife, who was too engrossed to prevent her from going astray. Speaking of which, food was also a part of a place. Lord Shi specially introduced 2 kinds of food to Jingwan. There might be food in other places, but it was definitely not as delicious as the Kaming mansion. Jingwan's appetite was aroused. She wanted to eat such little food. Naturally, she bought, and bought. Jingwan asked people to buy more for everyone to try. They rested for a while in the tea house next door. They waited for the people who bought the food to come back. However, they only bought one kind of food. The other kind was limited every day and was said to be sold out. They could use their status to pressure people and ask them to make it immediately. Not to mention that the princess would not allow it, it would also expose their whereabouts. I'm incompetent. The guard did not do the job well and apologized. What does it have to do with you? Jingwan overstepped her authority and waved her hand to ask him to leave. The guard did not even look at Li Hongyuan's reaction and retreated to another table. Jingwan asked people to distribute most of the food. This was her habitual behavior. In the eyes of others, it was a reward. And the people who had done it for the first time were even a little flattered. It was not the first time. At the beginning, Jingwan was a little helpless. After many times, she was used to it and just waved her hand. Jingwan tasted it. It was very delicious and also quite unique. I don't know what the Kaming crisps taste like. It's a pity. I can only try it another day. Speaking of which, it's a little surprising that it was sold out so quickly. After all, relatively speaking, the price of Kaming crisps is not cheap. Very few commoners can afford to eat it. It's still early today. If it was not bought out by a rich family, it should not be sold out so quickly. Lord Shi continued. Is that so? Then there's no other way. However, we will not be staying in Kaming Mansion for one day. It doesn't matter if it's one more day. How can Ben Wang's Wang Fei be so wronged? Later, let someone go to the other courtyard to make it. Not to mention the people who served Jingwan, including Lord Shi, Yu Zhongqing, Li Suyen and the others, all naturally thought so. Wasn't it so? A dignified Wang Fei eating something from you was a great favor. What was the reason for wanting her to wait another day? Jean Qin Wang Fei did not make things difficult for her because she was benevolent. Jingwan wanted to say something, but after thinking about it, she decided to let it go. This was a matter of perception. It was created by the social background. It was not something that could be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. Moreover, if she said too much, other people would not feel that she was right. They would feel that she was deviating from the norm and associated with the common people. It was not a big matter, so there was no need to haggle over every ounce. Yi, let's go, Jingwan said with a smile. Li Hongyuan nodded and took the lead to get up. Very naturally, he reached out to support Jingwan. His every move was seen by Lord Shi. Because of Jingwan's kindness, he believed that it was not only him. The other 9 people, as long as they knew how to repay kindness, they all hoped that Jingwan could be well, have a good husband, and have a happy family. At the time when she was bestowed the marriage with Jean Qin Wang, they had a lot of worries in their hearts. But they could not say it, they could not care. After all, she was an outsider. If they interfered, it would have a bad influence on her. Thus, they could only watch helplessly. However, up until now everything was good. The happiest thing was that Jin Qinhuang loved her deeply and did not throw her to the side after marrying her. Just based on Li Hongyuan's attitude towards Jingwan, Lord Shi's view of him had changed by 70%. Jingwan did not plan to leave the city today. She was prepared to walk around the city. According to what Lord Shi said, Kai Ming Fu actually had a history of more than 2,000 years. It had been rebuilt on a large scale several times. Not only that, it was the capital city of 2 dynasties. It could be imagined that it should have a lot of advantages in many aspects. There were many places that were worth exploring. For example, there were some ancient buildings and treasures that recorded the detailed history of Kai Ming Fu. In addition to these, there were also places similar to gardens in Kai Ming Fu. That was not the private property of anyone in Kai Ming Fu, rather it belonged to the public property that no one in Kai Ming Fu could occupy. It was said that it was left behind by the first governor of the Kai Ming Fu of the Qi Yuan dynasty. He was an old official of the previous dynasty and his hometown was also in Kai Ming Fu. He was not young, but when he was in office for 4 years, a sudden illness took his life. Before his death, he did something that was simply shocking in the eyes of the world. He donated all the property that belonged to his branch and did not leave a single copper coin for his descendants, let alone his clansmen. He also declared that these things belonged to the entire Kai Ming Fu. If it was occupied by an individual, it would mean that the Qi Yuan dynasty would change. These words were very ruthless and directly alarmed Emperor Taizu. Emperor Taizu personally made the decision and issued an imperial edict to acknowledge his last wishes. As a result, his clansmen who originally stomped their feet and did not want him to enter the ancestral grave all shut their mouths and did not dare to say another word. Not only that, they also had to give him a grand burial. Today, it was unknown whether those unseen legacies were still there or not. That garden was still there and had even become a symbol of Kai Ming Fu. When one arrived at Kai Ming Fu, if one did not take a look at it, it would seem that one had not been here before. In Jingwan's opinion, this was simply the feudal version of giving away one's property for charity. When she first heard about it, Jingwan even suspected that this person had the same origin as her. After careful investigation, the possibility was too small, because other than that, he did not leave behind anything advanced. However, even Jingwan felt that it was inconceivable because he was an aboriginal. How should she put it? The history of the Qi Yuan and even the Qi Yuan before was very similar to the history of her previous life. Under the feudal dynasty, the emphasis was on the family, the clan, the protection of the descendants, and the roots. Everything was done for the future generations. Giving away one's property to a person before one's death was something that no one could understand. Therefore, even those who had benefited from him did not understand, let alone agree with his practice. They only said that he was simply crazy. Jingwan felt that perhaps she could understand because of her own reasons. She then asked Lord Shi about the governor's life and the situation of his descendants. Sure enough, when he was alive, he was the only one who held the highest position and power in the entire family. There was no one else who was decent. Although the property that he gave away was his private property, it was 70% of the total property of the entire family. It was no wonder that his clansmen were so angry. They even said that he was unfilial as he even gave away the things left behind by his ancestors. They also could not blame him for using the Qi Yuan's fate as a curse. A few years after his death, his descendants were the first to rise, followed by the other clansmen. Until now, they had multiplied into a family that could not be underestimated in the entire Qi Yuan, the Wei family. Jingwan heard everything and sighed softly. This Governor Wei is really bold. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Lord Shi asked, "Princess, why do you say that? Without destruction, there can be no construction. This is probably the reason why Governor Wei did this. The Wei clan, or perhaps the direct descendants of Governor Wei, should have something like a letter left behind by him. Otherwise, His earnest expectations and painstaking efforts would have been wasted if no one understood. I just don't know if he hid it away or gave it to someone. Princess, your words are interesting. But you are the person who fits Governor Wei's temperament the best. Li Hongyuan said. I didn't understand it at first, but after listening to your words, I suddenly feel enlightened. It seems that the world has misunderstood Governor Wei. We are not as good as you, Princess. Lord Shi bowed. Lord Shi, you flatter me. Jingwan did not explain further. Perhaps Governor Wei's thinking was slightly more advanced than others. The Grand Secretary's second wife is from the Wei family. The second wife is also a descendant of Governor Wei. It's just that she is 5 generations away from the main branch. Li Suyen suddenly said. Jingwan was stunned. She didn't expect there to be such a connection. As one of the leaders of the blackguard, it was not surprising that she knew this. But did Li Suyen suddenly say this because she suddenly thought of this, or did she have a special intention? On the other hand, Li Hongyuan tilted his head slightly to look at Li Suyen. His gaze changed slightly. There was no doubt that Ruan Ruizhong's second wife was a spy. However, he now felt that things were not that simple. The most important point was that Governor Wei was an old official of the previous dynasty. There was a need to send someone to investigate. If there was no problem, it would be fine. If there was a problem, after listening to the story, Jingwan's attention was finally diverted. Then she realized that her husband seemed to be unintentionally attracting bees and butterflies again. As expected, being too good-looking was also a big trouble. But this trouble had an owner. Outsiders could only look at it. Caming Crispy? Is this the Caming Crispy that Lord Shi mentioned? Jingwan accidentally saw a restaurant and saw the signboard. Yes, Princess. Using the prefectural city as the name and the name of the restaurant. It could be seen that he was very confident. It's so lively now. What's going on? Jingwan looked at the crowd blocking the entrance. Soon someone went to ask. When he came back, his expression was not very good. Master, the governor's son bought all the Caming Crispy. Speaking of which, the governor's son had taken a fancy to a girl who was engaged. But the girl's fiancé was a poor scholar. The girl's family was actually a nouveau riche. After hooking up with the governor's son, she did not like her fiancé anymore. And the poor scholar had to go bankrupt for a piece of Caming Crispy. https://www.bicon.com/11/11807/6653473. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book. www.bicon.com. Biku Gur mobile reading website. Bicon.com. Chapter 278. Speaking of which, the governor's son had taken a fancy to a girl who was engaged. However, the girl's fiancé was a poor scholar, and the girl's family was actually a nouveau riche. After hooking up with the governor's son, she looked down on her fiancé. As for the poor scholar, he had to sell his family fortune for a piece of Caming Crispy cake. And today's matter was a trap set up by the scumbag couple. A trap set up purely to humiliate the poor scholar, the kind that didn't require any technical content. The poor scholar didn't know that he had been cuckolded. Originally, he and his fiancée were childhood sweethearts. As her family gradually became rich, they gave him a lot of financial support. Of course, this so-called financial support was actually just to satisfy his basic needs for studying. They had ready-made ink, paper, and inkstone, the worst kind that didn't even have a copper coin in cash. Even so, his family was deeply grateful. In order to repay the kindness of his future in-laws, in order to let his future wife live a good life, he worked hard. The whole family also tightened their belts to provide for him to study. It could be said that he didn't care about the outside world and only focused on studying. Many neighbors vaguely discovered the matter of his fiancée, but because he was the governor's son, they didn't dare to make it public. They only secretly laughed at him. His parents also vaguely sensed it, but didn't get any actual evidence. They were also afraid that it would affect their son's studies, so they didn't dare to tell him. His fiancée, who basically didn't come to visit, suddenly came to visit. She mournfully expressed that the girl next door also wanted to eat a piece of Caming crispy cake from her fiancé's family. She didn't need too much, just one piece. One piece would be enough. The poor scholar's face was not good. The poor scholar's face did not look too good, not because of his fiancée's request, but because he could not even satisfy such a request. He had his own dignity and pride, but he did not want his parents to know. He took out the little money he had, but it was far from enough. Therefore, he tried his best to save money, write letters to people, and copy books for the bookstore. It was very smooth, smoother than ever before. He even sold a few pieces of his unpresentable calligraphy. The other party wanted his calligraphy. It did not matter whether the paper was good or not, and it did not matter whether it was framed or not. He could be said to be extremely happy. The time it took to save money was much shorter than expected, nearly a month. He finally had enough money. Carrying a big bag full of copper coins, he went to the Caming Crisps restaurant. Seeing that he wanted to buy Caming Crisps, and that he only had one piece, the people around him all curled their lips in disdain, saying something like a poor person should have the self-awareness of a poor person. He didn't even have a complete set of clothes, and he was so greedy that he wanted to eat Caming Crisps. He was really a poor and despicable person. The poor scholar's face was flushed red, as if he had been stripped naked. He was at a loss of what to do. However, the shopkeeper helped him out, saying that anyone who entered was a customer. If he wanted to buy, of course he would sell it to him. He took the bag of copper coins, called 2 waiters, and counted them in front of him. In the end, there were more than 10 coins missing. The shopkeeper said that he was sorry, he did not have enough money, so he could not sell it to him. Hearing this, one should know that the shopkeeper was definitely not a good person. If he was really a good person, he would have just taken the money and given the Caming Crisps to him. Moreover, he most likely knew that the other party was short of money. 1 piece of Caming Crisps, 3 taels of silver, 3,000 copper coins, and only a dozen coins. How could such a big restaurant be short of such a small amount? The poor scholar was an honest person, or it could be said that he was wholeheartedly immersed in the pile of books, and was somewhat ignorant of the ways of the world. He actually did not notice at all. Yesterday, he had happily told his fiancée that he was going to deliver the Caming Crisps today. Now, he did not know why he was short of money. He remembered to scratch his ears and scratch his cheeks. He gave up his dignity and humbly begged the shopkeeper to sell him a piece. At this moment, the shopkeeper's face was stern, and he righteously said that they were a restaurant, doing business, not a charity hall. If he was short of money, then please leave, and do not obstruct their business. The poor scholar had no choice but to take the money bag and prepare to leave. He did not care about other people's opinions, only thinking about how to explain it to his fiancée. When he turned around, he saw his fiancée enter, but she was in the arms of a noble young master. At that moment, the blood drained from his face. It was not only because his fiancée's gentle and soft face was full of ridicule, but also because she, a girl who was engaged, actually did not have any sense of propriety, justice, or integrity as she leaned in the arms of another man. His hand trembled as he pointed at her. You what you? You want a piece of Caming Crisps for a month? But I'm sorry, this lady is tired of eating it recently. You still don't know, right? If it was not for the young master's help, even if you saved up for a month, you would not be able to save up a piece of Caming Crisps. Speaking of which, you are really a good-for-nothing. The young master did not have the time to play with you for too long, so he kindly helped you. Are you happy that your calligraphy has been recognized? Unfortunately, it was thrown into a smelly ditch in the blink of an eye. Is the money not enough? I took it. Tell me, a person like you wants to marry this lady, making this lady suffer with you. Who do you think you are, making this lady suffer? Aren't you afraid that your lifespan will be shortened? The poor scholar's face turned pale, and his vision darkened. How could he not understand what was going on? Thinking about how he had been toyed with like a monkey by these people, and how his heart had been trampled on like this, he almost fainted. Young master, didn't you say that you have never seen what a copper coin looks like? How about I let you see it now? The fiancée turned her head and smiled tenderly at the noble young master who was hugging her. In public, she even reached out her hand to caress his chest and rubbed it with her full chest. How was this a woman from a good family? Even the prostitutes in the brothel were more reserved and courteous than her. The poor scholar staggered and almost fell. This kind of girl, this kind of person, was actually his fiancée? All right, this young master really wants to see it. As he spoke, the governor's son lewdly pinched the girl's chest. The girl pouted coquettishly and turned to the poor scholar, but her expression immediately changed. She took 2 steps forward and snatched the money bag from his hand. Opening it, she took out a string of coins and pulled the string open. The copper coins fell to the ground with a clatter. When the girl heard the governor's son clapping and cheering, her face became happier and happier. She moved even faster, scattering close to 3,000 copper coins all over the ground. There were more and more onlookers. Some joined in to watch the show. Of course, there were also those who expressed sympathy for the poor scholar. However, no one dared to say a word. The youngest son of the governor was famous in the Kaming prefecture for his lawlessness. He was a tyrant. When people saw him, many would immediately retreat. Shopkeeper, take out all of today's Kaming pastries. The governor's son looked at the poor scholar. Seeing that you have made this young master amuse himself for a month, I will give you all of today's Kaming pastries. After you finish them all, there will be an additional reward. The Kaming pastries were brought out. The color was plump and the fragrance was enticing. Then, they were poured on the ground and crushed by the governor's son with his foot. Hurry up! Finish them all! The poor scholar was so angry that his whole body was trembling. You've gone too far. Oh, what are you saying? But, so what if this young master bullies you? Guards. 2 guards came forward and grabbed the poor scholar. One of them kicked the back of his knees, forcing him to kneel on the ground and pressing his head against the ground. The poor scholar's eyes were red and his eyes were about to crack. He roared in anger, "Where is the justice? Where is the law? The world is not fair, the world is not." Ugh. His mouth was forcefully stuffed with crushed Kaming pastries. His eyes were filled with unspeakable hatred. Justice? The law. I am the justice. I am the law. Force it all down his throat. The onlookers could not help but retreat. There were quite a number of young masters who hung out with the governor's youngest son, and they all knew what he was up to recently. Hence, they all came to watch the fun. Most of them were jackals of the same lair as him, and they clapped their hands and cheered. There were also a few who frowned at his behavior. This was really too much. Bullying others in such a manner was also harming oneself. Move aside. The people blocking the door were separated from the outside. 2 rows of people completely blocked the people outside, making a path in the middle. A group of people walked in. They were led by a man and a woman. They looked very noble and dignified. Although their clothes were not particularly luxurious, those who knew their stuff could tell that it was not ordinary just by looking at the material of the clothes. Many people took a deep breath. This person was too good-looking. When did such a person come to Kaming Prefecture? There were some who were still clear-headed and immediately guessed the most likely identity of these people. Then, they thought of the advice from their families and their faces changed. Although a strong dragon could not suppress a snake, that was only because the strong dragon was not strong enough. If they met someone they could not afford to offend, they could crush you to death with a raise of their hand. You would not even have the chance to cry out your grievances. And this person, even if he was their father, they would have to lie down and hide. They absolutely could not provoke him. Subconsciously, he pulled the person beside him who was on good terms with him and stepped back. He looked at the door and saw that it was blocked. His hopes of leaving quietly were dashed. If he left from the back, it would be too obvious. His heart could not stop beating. Something bad was going to happen today. This youngest son of the governor was the #1 devil in the entire Kaming mansion. Moreover, his father had climbed up step by step from the Kaming mansion, which meant that he had been in the Kaming mansion since he was very young. His father had not been in power yet and was kept in the mansion to abuse his power. As his father's power increased, he gradually bullied men and women outside. From the time he was born until he was almost 20 years old, he had never suffered any setbacks or been oppressed by anyone. Because no matter what happened, it would be settled in the end. Therefore, the word fear did not exist in his dictionary. He did everything willfully without thinking. At this time, anyone could see that something was wrong, but he was the only one who was ignorant and had his eyes on Jingwan first. Jingwan might not be the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, but she was definitely a woman with the most outstanding temperament. For a person like him, she had a great attraction. This little lady. His lustful gaze swept over Jingwan from head to toe. Unfortunately, he stopped abruptly after saying 4 words. His body flew backwards and his whole body landed heavily on the ground. Of course, the one who made a move was not Li Hongyuan. Because Jingwan was standing beside him, he was slightly slower. Someone dared to flirt with his wife in front of him. If he made a move, someone would definitely die. Perhaps it was because he sensed this that Yu Zhongqing made the first move. The #1 demon king of the Kai Ming constabulary had been kicked, which shocked everyone quite a bit. Naturally, his bodyguards subconsciously swarmed forward. However, they had only taken a step forward when they were instantly thrown to the ground. Their blades were snatched away, and the shiny blade was pressed against their necks. As long as they moved, their blood would splatter everywhere. The situation changed too quickly. For a moment, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. This was the real tough one. "How dare you attack me? Do you know?" Yi Zichen said. Yu Zhongqing stepped forward and stepped on his neck. He used his strength to crush the governor's son who was trying to crawl up to the ground. "If you say another word, your head will be separated from your body." After nearly 20 years of life, he finally knew the word, fear. Although he was angry, he did not dare to open his mouth. Jingwan did not stop Yu Zhongqing from making a move. This meant that she was really angry. Jingwan stepped forward and used a handkerchief to pick up a piece of Kaming crispy cake from the ground. "This is Kaming crispy cake? It looks pretty and smells good. When I asked someone to buy it before, they said that there was none left. It was a pity at first, so I thought that this thing was expensive. Looking at it now, it doesn't seem to be the case. I didn't even eat a piece. It was ruined by others." Her hand loosened, and the handkerchief fell to the ground. It was clearly a soft voice, but it made many people's legs tremble. Especially that shopkeeper. Beads of sweat rolled down his head. This madam, if you want to eat, we have as much as you want." "Eat things that others stepped on for fun?" Jingwan asked indifferently. The shopkeeper's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. No. In the future, I don't want to see Kaming crispy cake anywhere, especially the Kaming crispy cake from Kaming residence. If I bump into it, I'm afraid that the relevant people will be sent to prison to squat for a while." Jingwan's tone did not change. "Wait until I die, then you can continue to sell it." The people of the present age were particular about exclusive secret recipes. They were very careful about the things passed down from their ancestors. The Kaming crispy cake from other places was probably just a form. So, it was just changing the name. It should not cut off people's livelihood. As for whether this restaurant would be affected, it was not within her consideration. Jingwan walked to the front of that poor scholar. "Get up." The poor scholar was still a little dazed, but he still did as he was told subconsciously. But when he thought of his sorry state, he shrank back a little. A real man should be indomitable and stand straight with his head up and chest out. Jingwan's tone finally had some ups and downs. The poor scholar still acted before his consciousness. And at this moment, he saw clearly this extraordinary woman. Her hands were naturally folded in front of her lower abdomen. She was dignified and magnanimous, and her face was cold. In his eyes, she was like a fairy from the ninth heaven. His original thought of overturning all women because of his fiancée's betrayal instantly disappeared without a trace. But it was only a glance, and he quickly lowered his head, not daring to look again. It was not only because it was improper to look at her, but more importantly, it was blasphemy to look at such a woman directly. The world is indeed unfair. I don't know where the justice is, but the law is there. It's just that there's a lack of people to protect it. I'm giving you a chance now, and I'm giving you the best environment to study. I promise you that as long as I'm in power, as long as you have the ability, your future will not be hindered by external factors. I hope that one day, when others shout that the world is unfair, you can stand up and uphold justice for them, and tell them where the law is. Even if you can't make the world a bright place, you can still use your hands to sweep it clean. The poor scholar was moved. His lips trembled. After a moment, he said, "I definitely won't disappoint madam." Jingwan nodded and did not say anything else. She turned to the woman who was cowering at the side. Her eyes were cold. "If you were forced and had no choice, it's fine. Even if you despise the poor and favor the rich, and want to climb up the social ladder, it's understandable. If you want to live a good life, you can't be wrong. You can just cancel the marriage. You shouldn't humiliate others like this. This is a complete corruption of character. Do you think that a person like you, even if you marry into a noble family, can really have the life you want? Daydreaming is unrealistic. Wake up." Even if she did not know Jingwan's true identity, the woman who used her connections to intimidate others did not dare to breathe loudly at this moment. How could they not see that what had truly angered this madam was not the caming cake, but the actions of the governor's son and the others? It was just that her status was noble, and a trivial matter was also a huge matter. In comparison, everything that the poor scholar had suffered, in some people's eyes, was actually nothing. If she wanted to use this as a pretext to make a fuss, no one could easily let things go. And those who had guessed in their hearts could now be 100% sure. Jingwan glanced around indifferently and walked to Li Hongyuan. "You once told me that you and I are husband and wife, sharing honor and disgrace, and equal status." "Yes, I said that. So, what you said today is what I said." A self-proclaimed person who was still hoping for a fluke was also completely disheartened. Those who didn't know were shocked. Yesterday, there was a sea of people at the ferry crossing. Many officials had gathered, and they were all guessing whether or not some important person had come. Could it be this person, a prince? Jingwan's face finally showed a trace of a smile. "The governor should be here soon. So what if he's here?" Li Hongyuan glanced at the governor's son who was still stepped on by Yu Zhongqing. He offended his superiors, disrespected the royal family, and claimed to be the law of the land. This is deceiving the emperor. So be it. Father has no reason to nag at me. But thinking that the princess does not want to see me kill people, I'll set a price and let the governor redeem him with money. This time, there is a big problem in Jiangnan. I'm afraid that Tongzhou County will not be clean. Just right, I'll help father fill the national treasury first. An arm, 100,000 taels. A leg, 150,000 taels. A descendant's root, 200,000 taels. A body, 300,000 taels. And a head, 500,000 taels. And calculate the total for me. When the governor arrives, ask him for money. Just cut off the amount that is less. By the way, his son ruined my and the princess's fun. Add another 1 million taels. Let him calculate the money clearly before we talk about his son. Jingwan glanced at him. That was why she said that this person was the biggest cancer in Lang Lang's world. She had simply shot herself in the foot just now when she was swept clean by someone else. Also, is it really good for you to reveal the matter in Jiangnan? Although almost everyone knew about the college examination, the salt policy was very well hidden. Since it was related to money, how could it be just a problem of the college examination? Those who did not care could not hear it, but those who cared would definitely listen carefully. As for the others, I'll count them one by one. The lowest rank is 100,000 taels. For every higher rank, I'll add another 100,000 taels. Let their fathers take the money to collect their bodies. If they don't pay for a day, I'll temporarily raise them for a day. If it's more than 3 days, I'll take the money to collect their bodies. Of course, 10% of the money is enough. I'm merciful and will not ask them for the money for food and accommodation. Master, don't worry. I'll remember it. I'll make sure that no one is wrong. No one is missing. A group of childs who came to watch the fun wished that there was a hole in the ground for them to crawl into and disappear completely. Living king of hell, he was really a real king of hell. Why didn't they listen to him and obediently stay at home for a few days? They obviously did not do anything, but they had to suffer such an unexpected disaster? It should be known that not all of them were favored at home. There were even some illegitimate sons who followed these people just to raise their status and make their official mother and brothers have some scruples. But now, they were all wiped out. The biggest backer was the most miserable. With only 10% of the money, he could get rid of them quickly. There was no need to think about how the family would choose. They were so scared that they wet their pants. Their minds were in a mess. As if they were crazy, they wanted to escape. However, it seemed that a group of good-for-nothings could not escape from a group of well-trained guards. As soon as their front foot stepped out, their back foot was tripped and a hard foot fell on their back. They were stepped onto the ground and could not move. They struggled to resist, but the knife fell mercilessly. It was not fatal, but blood splashed everywhere. Screams sounded. How many people had seen such a scene before? They were scared and screamed. "Shut up!" An E sternly reprimanded. "This matter has nothing to do with you. Stay here obediently. When the matter is over, you can leave safely. Whoever dares to disturb the prince and princess will immediately become a ghost under the knife." As soon as these words came out, everyone quieted down. Even if they could not stop crying, they covered their mouths tightly and did not dare to make the slightest sound. Originally, as ordinary people, they also hated these tyrants. Li Hongyuan came up and ruthlessly tidied them up. Naturally, it was very satisfying. However, seeing blood and seeing people's lives as grass, that should make people afraid. Just like Li Hongyuan in the capital. There were only rumors that he had forcefully kidnapped women several times, causing many families to be ruined. As for what actually happened, no one knew. At most, it was just hearsay. More often than not, those silk pants saw him like a mouse seeing a cat. However, ordinary people saw him as a demon. Jingwan looked rather helpless, but Li Hongyuan did not care at all. Even if everyone in the world was afraid of him, it did not matter. As long as Wanwan was not afraid of him and stood firmly by his side, it was enough. Other people were simply not within his scope of consideration. The hurried and disorderly sound of horse hooves came from all directions. No matter if they were riding horses or sitting in carriages, they all gathered together. It wasn't just 1 or 2 people who were keeping an eye on the governor's courtyard. Many officials had sent people as well. In the end, they were easily knocked unconscious and thrown into a pile. When they were discovered, the people at the bottom almost lost their lives. Only then did they know that there was no one in the side courtyard. Because they did not know where they went and what they wanted to do, they were afraid that they would escape and have other motives. Naturally, they anxiously sent people to search for them. The waterways and the 4 city gates were all sent people to block. They could not sit still and searched in the city. Speaking of which, there were many people and they were scattered. There were a few people in the vicinity. Jingwan probably did not expect them to have such a big lineup. Perhaps Li Hongyuan was also within her expectations. In fact, before they entered Kaming Crispy Restaurant, they had already been discovered. They quickly went to report back to their masters. That was why they came so quickly. But before they arrived, another bad news came. Not only the governor, but as long as one had a vile spawn, they were all on tenterhooks, afraid that they would also be involved. In fact, Li Hongyuan's people had discovered the other party a step earlier. However, if they just coincidentally came up and disturbed Jingwan's original plan, Li Hongyuan would not give them face. When the officials received the news, they secretly hated the vile spawn for not listening to their words. If they had known earlier, they would not have let them take half a step out of the house even if they had to break their legs. They were also secretly angry that Li Hongyuan had nothing better to do than to make a private visit. You have been so high profile all the way, can't you continue to be high profile? With them following, how could they let their vile spawn collide? Didn't they say that their princess consort was not feeling well? Going out so early, did it look like she was not feeling well? Standing at the entrance of Kaming Crispy Restaurant, the officials who were in a hurry did not have their usual elegant bearing. They either wiped their sweat with their sleeves or staggered in their steps. Without saying a word, they rushed to the front of the two and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. It was their negligence that caused their vile spawn to collide with the prince. Princess consort, please forgive us. Li Hongyuan looked down at them condescendingly and did not say a word. When the main character arrived, looking at his appearance, he probably already knew the truth of the matter. Otherwise, even his clothes would not be drenched in sweat. Li Hongyuan then slowly opened his mouth. You all are quite fast. However, this prince remembers that horses are not allowed in the city and the carriage cannot be too fast. Looking at you all, you do have this prince's style. After all, this prince is in the capital. Occasionally, this prince will let the horses loose, but most of the time, it will only overturn the carriages of other brothers. This is not a problem for my brothers. However, along the way, how many people have you injured and how many stalls have you overturned? Are they your people? There is no need to question them at all? This was a matter that had not been resolved yet, and yet another matter had come up. However, a certain someone was too shameless. He could set a fire, but others could not light a lamp. If things went wrong, this would be another crime. Before they could even say a few words to him, one big accusation after another was placed on them. If this continued, there was no need to find the most fatal thing about them. They would have to take off their hat first. In the end, they still did not understand this person's way of doing things. It was because they were too flustered that they repeatedly made mistakes. They had to calm down, calm down, calm down. It is this lowly official's fault. Please rest assured, Your Highness. This lowly official will not say a word about how to punish them. Li Hongyuan chuckled. However, no matter how one listened to it, it sounded like mockery. If that is the case, then it can't be better. Servants, please invite the young masters of these officials out. Even if they tried their best to hide in the ordinary crowd, hoping that they would not be recognized and escape the disaster, in the end, they were still found out one by one. The deeper they hid, the more severe the physical pain they suffered. Therefore, when they were brought out, only a few of them did not have any bruises on their faces. After all, there were more than 10 of them in this group. Those who did not have their children breathed a sigh of relief one after another, while those who had 2 or even 3 children in their families almost fainted. Eunuch Mu stood out and repeated Li Hongyuan's words before. Just now, we have learned that among the elders of these young masters, the lowest official position is standard 6th rank, 100,000 taels of silver. Secondary 5th rank, 200,000 taels of silver. Standard 5th rank, 300,000 taels of silver, and so on. As for standard 2nd rank, 900,000 taels of silver is not a lot. Sirs, make sure that your children are in there and what rank your official position is. Then, you can go home and prepare the money. Of course, you can also prepare 10% of the money and collect the corpse 3 days later. Speaking of which, the higher the position of the elder, the more valuable the living person is. Correspondingly, the less valuable the corpse is. For 6th rank, you can only save 90,000 taels of silver, but for 2nd rank, you can save 810,000 taels of silver. If it were me, I could still make up 90,000 taels of silver. As for 810,000 taels of silver, I don't want this money-losing thing. Jingwan glanced at Eunuch Mu. To be honest, if she were these people, she would definitely want to eat him alive, especially the money-losing thing he mentioned. Mu and shut up. Eunuch Mu shuddered and immediately retreated to the side like a lackey. As the saying goes, if the son is not taught well, the father is to blame. These young masters of the Kaming mansion are really surprising. What do you think they are doing? Of course, I am just a woman. If I say these things, everyone here will probably think that I am a hen in charge. It is just that Prince Yi has always been impatient with everything, so I overstepped my boundaries and said a few more words. If there is anything inappropriate, I hope that everyone here will be magnanimous and not take it seriously. His Highness, I am not in the mood today. Let's go back. Don't be long-winded with these people. Only you have a good temper, but they won't appreciate it at all. Li Hongyuan seemed to be reproaching, but his tone was gentle. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653480. HTML click here to report, no registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Bicken.com Mobile Edition. Chapter 279. Why are you being so long-winded with these people? Only you have a good temper, but they won't appreciate it at all. Li Hongyuan seemed to be reprimanding, but his tone was gentle. Since I'm no longer interested, I'll naturally go back. In any case, he paused meaningfully, this Kaming manor, other than those irritating things, everything else is pretty good. It's not a big deal to stay for 10 days or half a month. Otherwise, before returning to the capital, I'll stay in Kaming Manor. As for the other matters, other people will take care of it. I believe that many people will be very happy. In the 4 counties and 28 manors of Jiangnan, there were countless officials. Each one of them was on tenterhooks. After knowing that you were an imperial envoy, they didn't have a good night's sleep. If you stayed in Kaming Manor, those people could only say that they were happy. That was definitely not enough to describe it. It could be said that they would sing and dance in celebration. However, the officials of Kaming Manor were probably going to vomit blood. Originally, it had nothing to do with them. Kaming Manor was just a place they passed by. Now, they had to face the King of Hell alone. If it was easy to serve, no, it didn't need to be easy. It didn't need to be easy, as long as they could serve him, then they would do their best to wear out this period of time. The problem was that this master was completely impossible to serve. No matter what you did, he wasn't satisfied, he wasn't happy, and he would pick on you. He would throw a tantrum at the slightest thing. How was it possible for people to live like this? Jing Wan, who understood Li Hongyuan's temperament more and more, lit 32 candles for these people and observed a moment of silence. Speaking of which, those people who relied on him early on, how did they muddle through under his hands? Needless to say, those were true warriors who had been tempered into steel. However, there was one thing that could be confirmed. Those who had been properly trained by Li Hongyuan, their efficiency in doing things was definitely very high. After all, if they did their job well, they could obtain relief. If they didn't do it well, they would be endlessly destroyed and tortured by him. Over time, everyone's spirit would weaken and they would lose the will to live. The only way was to do everything in one go and face him less if they could. All of their motivation was not to receive praise, but to avoid torture. This could be considered a great oddity for all eternity, right? Alright, the King of Hell was quite generous when he was being generous. Otherwise, who would want to hang out with him unless they were masochists? Jing Wan hadn't realized that she was the #1 warrior. She wasn't the kind who struggled to survive under the King of Hell, but the kind who could tie the King of Hell and climb over his head. Since they had decided to leave, they naturally wouldn't stay for long. A group of young masters were driven to follow behind the carriage in a sorry state. Before they left, they cried for their parents and begged their elders to save their lives. Whenever someone fell behind or was disobedient, the guards wouldn't be polite at all. They would use the sabers they seized to hit them. Although they didn't hit their heads, it was definitely painful. Even if they were fathers or grandfathers, they could only watch helplessly and couldn't do anything about it. This was especially true for the governor's son, who was given special treatment. If others were to suffer one blow, he would have to suffer two. Furthermore, he was used to being a tyrant and would subconsciously retaliate whenever he was hit. Naturally, he would suffer even more. It was simply a vicious cycle. The governor clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Did he hate him? Of course he hated him. However, he didn't know if this hatred was only directed at Li Hongyuan or if it was mixed with something else. After all, this kind of disaster happened because his own family didn't teach their child well. Otherwise, Jin Qinhuang's actions would be untenable. What he had to consider now was whether to save this evil creature or not. It wasn't that he couldn't take out 2,500,000 taels. Furthermore, even if he took it out, it wouldn't hurt his family. However, after taking it out, he would have to consider the consequences. He wasn't from an aristocratic family. As Li Hongyuan had said, building that big courtyard had already exceeded the scope of his family's assets. Thus, he could still reluctantly take out 2,500,000 taels. However, don't forget why the emperor had sent an imperial envoy. At this juncture, he wanted to confiscate his family's property and exterminate his family. Furthermore, according to his family's assets, the master above wouldn't be filial enough. Furthermore, the master himself had been targeted by the emperor. The possibility of him being saved was too low. Abandoning this son like this and betting that Jin Qinhuang wouldn't really kill him? A sixth grade of 100,000 taels similarly exceeded the family's assets. Those who would take out this amount of money most likely wouldn't be much. However, that letter clearly said that Jin Qinhuang's temperament was perverse, his moods were unstable, he was daring and reckless. He didn't give anyone face. Even if it was a brother who held real power, if he said he would make a move, he would make a move without the slightest hesitation. How could they be sure that he wouldn't stop because of a dozen lives? Governor Darren, now what should we do? The others were somewhat out of their wits, hoping that the governor could come up with a solution. After all, his son was the main culprit. The others were all fish in the moat that were implicated. If this matter couldn't be resolved perfectly, they wouldn't only hate Jin Qinhuang, they would also hate him. Then, in the future, he would have a lot of trouble in Kai Ming Fu. Go back and tell your family's foreign, go and request to see Jin Qinhuang Fei. No matter what, you must see her once. Jin Qinhuang Fei no longer will not do anything to the womenfolk. Although it couldn't be said that women were absolutely more soft-hearted than men, but in most cases, it was indeed so. Moreover, looking at Jin Qinhuang Fei, she didn't have that kind of vicious temperament. That letter also said that they had to pay attention to Jin Qinhuang Fei. It seemed that they still underestimated this point because she was a woman. Now, she might be the key or even the only breakthrough point. Right, hurry back. Originally, he had already prepared to let his foreign go and visit Jin Qinhuang Fei, who was unwell. However, there was an unforeseen event, so now he had no choice but to go. Without stopping to rest, he hurried back. Naturally, he didn't forget to send people to follow behind Jin Qinhuang Fei's carriage to watch the gongzi. Only the governor stayed until the end. He looked at that poor scholar and didn't say a word. However, that scholar felt as if he was being stared at by a poisonous snake and subconsciously wanted to retreat. Suddenly, he thought of Jingwan's words, so he raised his head and puffed out his chest. This commoner greets Governor Darren. The governor probably didn't think that he would have such a reaction. You, very good, very good. Turning his head, he looked at that woman. Since you followed my son, naturally you are one of my Governor Manor's people. Someone come, bring her back. Finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left. Not to mention others, even that woman herself had sensed the governor's ill intentions. Thinking about it, she knew that if she went, it would most likely bode ill rather than well. Facing the two servants of the Governor Manor, she desperately struggled to escape, crying and shouting that she didn't want to go. She even reached out to the poor scholar for help. Not to mention that the poor scholar didn't have the ability to save her. Even if he did, he wouldn't help a woman who had betrayed him and humiliated him. You did so much. Wasn't it because you wanted to enter the Governor Manor? Now that you have fulfilled your wish, you should be happy. Don't worry, I will go back to your family to cancel the marriage. I definitely won't delay your future. The woman was stunned at first. She probably didn't think that the other party would be so heartless, shouting that she was wrong and begging him to save her. Unfortunately, everything couldn't be salvaged. A group of young masters being paraded through the streets. This was a big story. It attracted the attention of many people, so everyone rushed to spread the news. Naturally, more and more people gathered. These people were usually awe-inspiring and were avoided by others. They were complacent. Now, they only wished that there was a hole in the ground for them to crawl into. Of course, those who had such thoughts were those who hadn't completely fallen. Most people glared at them fiercely. The threat was self-evident. However, what they got in return was the pain of the scabbard on their bodies. That grimacing, incomparably miserable appearance simply made people clap their hands in joy. They couldn't help but inquire about which capable person was able to control this group of bullies. Therefore, in an extremely short period of time, the people of Kaming Manor knew that a prince of the current dynasty had graced them with his presence. This group of bullies of Kaming Manor, except for some who didn't go out today, or those who didn't get along with the governor's son and didn't get along, the rest of the bullies were all dealt with by this prince. Although a part of it was indescribably bloody, most people, especially those who had been bullied, were more willing to ignore this part. They only said, "Well done." Therefore, no matter how tyrannical a person was, when he met the wrong person, no matter how tyrannical he would be easily crushed. When they returned to the courtyard, this group of young masters were all mercilessly locked up in a small dark room. Anyway, there were enough rooms, one for each person. There were 2 imperial bodyguards guarding the door of each room. This time, they were real imperial bodyguards with swords. If they were obedient, then it would be good for you, good for me, and good for everyone. If they wanted to quarrel or make a scene, then they would be directly beaten up, tied up, and gagged. Li Hongyuan seemed to want to show that he was a man of his words. When he returned to the courtyard, he ordered to find the other important people who came with him this time. He clearly told them, "This prince has taken a liking to Kaming Manor. You all should quickly go and do things for this prince. If you do it well, then that's what you should do. If you don't do it well," then Li Hongyuan sneered twice. The meaning of his words was self-evident. The people who were originally loyal to Li Hongyuan couldn't help but shiver. They repeatedly responded and would not disappoint. Li Hongyuan didn't assign them specific tasks, whether they should work together or separately. He only let them negotiate. Don't know how many people rejoiced in their hearts. It turned out that things weren't as serious as they thought. So what if Jin Qinhuang made people fearful? In the end, he was someone who didn't understand anything. To fool him, it wasn't a difficult matter. Therefore, one after another, they expressed that everything would be handed over to them. Wang Ye only needed to accompany Wang Fei to relax and play in Kaming Manor. As for the people of Kaming Manor, they could only express their apologies. Although Kaming Manor was also one of the sources of benefits for the master, but now, they had to distinguish between the severity of the matter and the urgency of the matter, and make appropriate choices. Some people only wanted to say, "I hope you can be naive until the end. When the time comes, not only will you not be of help, but you will also fall into it." Being ruthless and black-hearted was the true nature of the King of Hell. In a place like Jiangnan, those who coveted the throne would not be easily let off. The same manor, the same county, it was impossible for it to be controlled by one person. Now, the people of each faction wanted to go to their own home ground to investigate. They wanted to help hide some important things, but they also needed to see if the people of the other factions would allow it. Even if it wasn't this kind of situation, Li Hongyuan would also turn it into this kind of situation. On the surface, there was peace, but in the dark, there were various kinds of hindrances. When Li Hongyuan pulled in the net, the things that they thought were hidden would be exposed by others. And Li Hongyuan didn't need to do much, he could just sit alone on the fishing platform. In fact, at this time, the more they did, the more mistakes they would make. If they obediently wrote a memorial and admitted their mistakes, perhaps Lu Chengdi would still be lenient. Everything had been planned out by Li Hongyuan when he was setting up the plan. And when Li Hongyuan summoned these people, Jingwan also received the madams who came. Originally, they were prepared to be rejected at the door and possibly put on a show of crying, making a fuss, and threatening to hang themselves. In the end, all their preparations were useless. Not only did Jingwan let them in at the first moment, she was also polite and had people serve them good tea and snacks. Before this cup of tea was finished, she herself appeared. Once again, they thought that they would be left out to drink a stomachful of tea, but it was all in vain. Jingwan's clothes were not particularly formal and grand, and the jewelry on her body was also very simple. She even wore a string of Buddhist beads on one of her wrists. But if one looked carefully, one would find that although it was simple, each of them was exquisite, expensive, generous, and dignified. Even many of them in their generation might not be able to have such a thing. No wonder the men in the family all said to bring some new and exquisite things to the door. It would be better if it was rare flowers and plants. As for the other things, no matter how expensive they were in their eyes, they would not be taken seriously by them. However, they were all surprised by Jingwan's young age, or rather, young age. Of course, only people who had no understanding of Li Hongyuan's love history would think so. After all, this matter in Jiangnan had nothing to do with him. The business was more important, so who would mention these irrelevant things? Because Jingwan's attitude was easygoing, but she did not lose her composure. She did not say anything else and just chatted with them about daily life. It did not feel like she was deliberately avoiding today's important matter. In fact, Jingwan immediately felt that these people's moods were different. Some of them were anxious, while others were indifferent. Jingwan could also guess the reason. It was nothing more than the difference between biological children and not biological children. If it was a grandfather and a grandson, it would be fine. But how could it be the same as running around for their own son and running around for the son of a concubine? However, there was one person who was especially friendly. She only praised Jingwan to the heavens. Her mouth was as sweet as honey. However, this soup of love did not have any effect on Jingwan. Moreover, she found that the others did not pay much attention to her. If it was not a problem with their character, then it was, "Which family is this madam from?" Replying to the princess, "This concubine is, Your Highness, she is the administrative commissioner's wife, Madame Ru." Another madam by the side spoke first. As expected, there was such a person among the group of official wives. Unless the official wife's family wanted the administrative commissioner, no official wife would associate with other people's concubines. It was a pity that none of the madams here today needed to curry favor with the other party. The person who was smiling like a flower and had a glib tongue suddenly changed her expression. But in the next moment, she put on a smile again. "Your Highness, this concubine. I didn't know that a concubine could go out to socialize, especially in front of me." This was the first time Jingwan called herself a concubine since her marriage. Her attitude could not be more obvious. "Come, send the guests away. Pass down the order that no one from the administrative commissioner's family is allowed to come here." The administrative commissioner's wife, Madame Ru, probably did not expect that Lin Mingya, who was so amiable just a moment ago, would suddenly turn hostile. "No, Your Highness, it's because my family's madam is seriously ill and cannot get out of bed. That's why Lei Oi let this concubine replace." Jingwan's eyes turned sharp and swept over. The person who was trying to defend herself seemed to be strangled and couldn't spit out a word. Madame Ru, please leave. If I let someone throw you out, I'm afraid that it would be even more unsightly." Jingwan's wet nurse was now promoted to a steward mama. Speaking of which, in the Wangfu, before the Wangfei married, there would be at least 2 steward mamas to serve the master. Jean Qin Wangfu was an exception. Li Hongyuan's wet nurse had died of an illness when he was 11 years old. After he opened the fu, what does an old woman want to do? At that time, none of the women above were able to enter Jin Qin Wang Fu. Therefore, in Jin Qin Wang Fu, there was no one who could restrain Jingwan. In other Wang Fu, because they had healed a Wang Ye and claimed credit, they took advantage of their seniority and pointed fingers at Wang Fei. This situation had long been completely strangled by Li Hongyuan. If you pointed fingers at his sweetheart, he would let you break your hands and feet. Although she was unwilling, she could only leave. Moreover, she couldn't show any resentment. However, she was a concubine who could replace the mistress to go out. Naturally, she had high standards in all aspects and wouldn't let people catch her in such an obvious place. Her rules were not wrong. After the eyesore left, Jingwan's expression returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Only, compared to before, the scene was slightly colder. Most likely, they didn't think that Jingwan would be so decisive, chasing people away just like that. Like them, even if it was the governor's wife or the governor's wife, even if they didn't like them, they would at most give them the cold shoulder. However, this wasn't the time to talk about this. Their own children were the key, but such a large sum of money. Wang Fei Nyong, although it is very rude. Jingwan slightly waved her hand. I know the purpose of everyone's visit, so there is no need to say anything. Although I am not a mother yet, but sooner or later, I will come to this step. I can understand the general feeling. Because there are people supporting the family, it is normal for the children to be poor. As parents and grandparents, all of you probably think so. However, if you put yourself in their shoes, just think about it. Just like today, when the prince replaced your children's role, how you feel now, and how the families of those who are harmed by your children feel. The pain your children are suffering now is also the pain of those who were harmed by them. Because of their inferior status, they suffered undeserved misfortune. Although the prince's status is higher, it is still reasonable for him to kill people for money. They are all raised by their parents, who doesn't want them to live a peaceful and happy life. In fact, in terms of age, I am only a junior to all of you. Because of my status, I said a few more words. If you think you can listen, please listen. This is just a one-sided opinion. Because of my young age, I have less experience and don't understand many things. Madams, please don't blame me. Your Highness, you are too serious. It is us who are shallow. We are ashamed. That's right. Such a simple truth was not as clear as a junior's. In fact, those who were of a lower status should understand this. They were bullied by someone they couldn't afford to offend, so they had to take revenge on someone of a lower status to feel better. Jingwan smiled. The prince is a prince. He was born noble and is favored by His Majesty. Forgive me for being disrespectful, but when it comes to lawlessness, there is probably no one in the entire Qi Yuan who can compete with him. Most people will more or less be restrained by others, but he is different, so he always does as he pleases. If he is unhappy, everyone will be unhappy with him. However, the prince won't take the initiative to cause trouble, so if you don't provoke him, he probably won't even look at you. Speaking of which, the prince is actually quite protective. Today's matter is partly because of me. However, it is true that the governor's wife's son went overboard and was unpleasant to the eye. The others were the result of the prince's anger. The governor's wife was a grandmother a long time ago. Her face was flushed red, but it was unknown whether it was due to shame or anger. Because the prince is favored by His Majesty has piled the best things in the world on him since he was young. It is widely acknowledged that his food and clothing are better than His Majesty's. He has never worried about money. To put it bluntly, he has no concept of money at all. He can use silver as copper coins, so there is no difference between 100,000 taels of silver and 100,000 copper coins. In fact, 100,000 copper coins is only 100 taels of silver. How can 100,000 taels of silver and 100 taels of silver be the same? Therefore, the prince's words at that time were just a casual remark. He didn't think that you can't afford it. However, he is a prince and as his wife, I can't embarrass him in public. Therefore, madams, you can rest assured that I will persuade the prince. However, since he has said it, it is not possible to waive all the money. I can guarantee that it will be much less than the original amount." Hearing her words, the madams all heaved a sigh of relief and thanked her profusely. They also said that as long as Jingwan gave them a number, they would immediately go back to raise money. "Actually, I have a suggestion. Why don't the madams listen to it?" Jingwan said with a little calculation in her eyes. "There's no harm in speaking your mind, esteemed Wang Fei." At this moment, their favorability towards Jingwan soared. Jingwan had a deeper meaning as she waved the people beside her away. When a woman marries, she must be filial to her parents-in-law, serve her husband, take care of her children, and take care of her uncles and aunts. It is a hard job, but most of the time, men don't care about it and think that it is natural. Not only that, they have a bunch of concubines in their rooms and ask their wives to be virtuous and magnanimous. They have taken all the good things in the world, so they should occasionally repay them a little. After saying this, Jingwan stopped and took a sip of her tea. The madams couldn't stop their hearts from beating fast as they eagerly looked at Jingwan. "Madams, when you go back home, tell your families that you have begged me. I have only agreed to ask the prince for a few more days. After that, you can come to the courtyard again. We won't do anything other than drink tea and chat. When you go back, you can bring back some good news. Let them feel that whether it is money or their children, they need to rely on you to save them. Like this, I don't believe that they will remain indifferent. As for what to do, it will be up to the madams." It had to be said, which one of them wasn't a shrewd person? Moreover, most of them were fighting machines in the inner courtyard. How could they not take advantage of such a good opportunity? With their acting skills, they could use any kind of emotion. They could be as sad as they could be and as anxious as they could be. They could grasp the degree of emotion well. Taking this opportunity, even if they did not benefit themselves, they could benefit their children and grandchildren. Especially those who came for the sake of the illegitimate sons. As long as they revealed a little and begged the Jin Wang Fei, there might be hope. They would not beg them to come to Jingwan. Those who had the intention of favoring the concubine and neglecting the wife would have to obediently take out more benefits. Only those couples who didn't have any barriers between them would not accept Jingwan's proposal. But were there any of them? No. They looked at each other and then stood up to give a bow. They were sincerely thanking her. Jingwan waved her hand. "There's no need for that. I just don't like it, that's all." Everyone knew about the unfinished words. Madame Ru, who had unceremoniously chased away the political envoy, was the best proof. But to go to such an extent and scheme against her husband, under normal circumstances, few people would think this way. Esteemed princess consort, but His Highness. Because of Jingwan's words, the relationship between the two sides seemed to have become much closer. They couldn't help but start to care about her. That's not it. His Highness is very good. The prince's mansion doesn't have any secondary concubines or concubines. I just don't have a good impression of any of them. It was no wonder that Jingwan used the word concubine. That was because she still had a mother-in-law who was a concubine. If word got out, she would be in trouble. If some things weren't exposed, then everything else could be discussed. But if it was exposed, then it wouldn't be the case. Esteemed princess consort, from the beginning, you sent this subject's servant away. Was it because of this? Now that everything was fine and their relationship was closer, she joked. Jingwan smiled. There's no need to expose this kind of thing. Everyone laughed and casually talked about some trivial things in their own families. When it came to Jingwan, she didn't hide anything. Everyone was surprised that she was younger than they had expected. I thought that esteemed princess consort only had a tender face, but I didn't think that she was really only 15. This kind of bearing, a normal person wouldn't be able to cultivate it even after several decades. Everyone else echoed and praised Jingwan. Although there was a bit of flattery, most of it was sincere. Madams are overpraising me. Jingwan smiled lightly. It wasn't until Li Hongyuan sent people to find her that Jingwan expressed that she didn't want them to stay. This subject servant has disturbed esteemed princess consort. It's just that the evil creatures in the family. Everyone, don't worry. Although they won't be as comfortable as they are at home and might even suffer some physical pain, please believe that they won't be injured or lose a piece of flesh. I personally think that it's better for those people to suffer a bit and be taught a lesson. If we want His Highness to let go of the silver, we naturally have to let him cool down. Speaking of this, Jingwan showed a bit of embarrassment. With my understanding of His Highness, I'm afraid that even if you give him the silver, he won't easily let them go. This time, everyone was anxious. Jingwan sighed, there's nothing we can do about it. I can persuade His Highness to take a step back, but I can't make him give in completely. We've gone too far. It's obvious that esteemed princess consort can do this. It's already not easy. If you ask me, esteemed princess consort is right. That evil creature should be taught a lesson. If he doesn't learn his lesson this time, he won't be so lucky to have another person like esteemed princess consort to deal with him in the future. When the time comes, should we let him give up his life or let his whole family die? One of the madams said coldly. At a glance, it was obvious that they came for the bastard. However, her words were very reasonable, so they hardened their hearts and even said that as long as His Highness didn't lose an arm or a leg, he could let people teach him a lesson. Then they all said goodbye. But when they left, their faces were filled with sadness. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Sure enough, they were all kings of acting. Even the people who served them realized that the situation was not good when they saw their expressions. They served them carefully and didn't dare to breathe loudly. Not long after they left, Li Hongyuan came over and the maids were still cleaning up the mess. Is His Highness finished? Jingwan asked. It's already finished. I don't have to do anything specific. It's just a matter of a few words. But on your side, it's endless. Women are troublesome. What are you talking about? Jingwan glared at him. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you. This troublesome woman definitely doesn't include you. I hope that Wan can be more troublesome and trouble me all the time. Li Hongyuan hurriedly coaxed. When that time comes, you'll dislike me. At most, I'll do something else. I'll never dislike you. Li Hongyuan chuckled. He held her face and kissed her fiercely. Jingwan was about to reach out and slap him away, but Li Hongyuan stopped. He sat beside her and played with her fingers. What did you say to them? Jingwan didn't hide anything and told him everything. Then she smiled and said, What does His Highness think? What does Wan want me to think? Jingwan asked calmly. You promised them a discount without discussing it with you. You slandered you, saying that you have no concept of money and that you help women scheme against men. None of these should make you feel good. Jingwan counted with her fingers and listed them one by one with Li Hongyuan. First, it was expected. My original intention was to let you do this. Second, your husband, I really have no concept of money. Third, what do those people have to do with me? Are they that important because they are estranged from their wives? My good heart, although you've made some progress, it's still far from enough. No matter what you want to do, just do it. Even if it's my decision, I'll take responsibility for it. If something goes wrong, I'll fix it. So, there's no need to worry. Yuan, it's easy for you to spoil people like this, do you know? There are many things that you can't joke about casually. If you poke a hole or make a mistake, it's not something that can be easily covered up. It's not something that can be fixed just because you want to. For example, a dead person can't be brought back to life. You understand all these, don't you? I know, I understand. You're so serious when talking about these things. Tell me, do you think it's easy for me to spoil you like this? It should be said that it's not that I have to clean up after you do something. It's that you have to clean up after me. There's a wild beast in my heart called unscrupulous. You're the rope that binds it to prevent me from making irreversible mistakes. So, Wan, you really don't have to worry about anything. For you, as long as something makes you lose your mind, I promise that it will never happen. It was fine if he didn't stir up emotions, but once he did, it made people's hearts unbearable. Sure enough, she shouldn't have started this topic in front of this bastard. Jingwan held back her tears and said with a smile, maybe it's two things. If something happens to you, don't jinx it. Li Hongyuan directly sealed her words with a kiss. Wan, even if you die, you'll definitely die before me. I won't leave you to deal with my funeral. Hey, you're a few years older than me. It's fine if you die of old age. If not, I'll lose too much. Of course I'll die of old age. I'll try my best to live longer than you. Not only will we be born in the same bed, but we'll also die in the same coffin. Jingwan smiled and rubbed her chin on his neck. Okay. They hugged each other quietly for a while. Ah Yuan, how much do you think we should give them in terms of silver? There's no doubt that there's a problem in Kaming Prefecture and even the entire Tongzhou County. Kaming Prefecture is a prefectural city and also a county, so the problem is particularly serious. However, there are only a few people that need to be dealt with. Because the purpose of this trip isn't here, it's not easy to investigate thoroughly. Otherwise, there'll be suspicion of overstepping one's authority. You know there's a problem, but you didn't ask you to do it. If you do, the one on the throne will be unhappy. I stayed in Kaming Prefecture to alert the enemy. When the time comes, I don't have to do anything. He'll take action himself. As for the silver, you can reduce it as much as you want. You don't have to be polite to the people you want to deal with. That administrator isn't a good person either. Okay. As for the group of scumbags she brought back, it wasn't that her husband wanted to appease his anger, but she wanted to teach them a good lesson. However, Jingwan didn't care about the governor's son. This narrow-minded man would never let him go. It was good enough to keep him intact. Lord Zhua Qianshi of the Blackguard, you also sent him out? Jingwan also seemed to see Yu Zhongqing's figure. These two had been inseparable before, assisting other people in their work. After that, they didn't go out again. It wouldn't be too late to go out and play after this matter was completely settled. After dismissing the irrelevant people, Li Hongyuan was also very idle. Jingwan didn't go out, he also didn't go out. It was a typical case of having a wife and everything was enough. At this time, they couldn't find out any news about this courtyard. Each and every one of them could only scratch blindly. The previous style of living King of Hell was absolutely consistent with what was written in the letter. But now, it was as if he was a different person. If it wasn't for the many Furins going to the courtyard every day and being able to see Jin Qinhuang Fei every day and occasionally see Jin Qinhuang, they would have thought that there was no one inside. Of course, it was said that the number of hours the Furins sat on the cold bench increased day by day. If it wasn't for their reputation, they might have been rejected at the door. However, the result of the Furins' perseverance was still gratifying. Until the 5th day, Jin Qinhuang Fei didn't appear again. But she spread the word that the money was reduced to 10%, which was the original money for buying the corpse. The original 100,000 to 900,000 taels, now 10,000 to 90,000 taels. Every family could take it out and there was nothing more to say. And the group of Furins were very grateful to Jingwan. What they got from the family was far beyond their expectations. They fiercely held their heads up high. Originally, it wasn't that they didn't suspect that this was actually a play performed by Jin Qinhuang and Jin Qinhuang Fei. But the matter of the governor's son humiliating the poor scholar, it was impossible for the two of them to have known about it. Moreover, the one who benefited from the whole thing seemed to be Jin Qinhuang Fei's benevolent reputation. What was the use of this? The officials would not be deeply grateful to Jin Qinhuang just because they gave less money, so it had nothing to do with Jin Qinhuang's work in Jiangnan. Thinking left and right, it was still Jin Qinhuang Fei's actions that were the most reliable. No matter whether it was reliable or not, as the Furins who really benefited, they had to continue singing this play. After the news was released, each family hurriedly went home to raise money, and then sent it to the door one after another. Corresponding to their official position, the amount was given. Everyone was very successful. The only one who wasn't successful was the administrator. Other people reduced the amount, but he didn't have a share. The administrator, secondary second rank, 800,000 taels, not a single copper coin less. 80,000 taels to take the person back. There was no way. Jin Qin Wang said that the administrator letting Ru Furin come was a humiliation to his Wang Fei. That was also a humiliation to him. He expressed that he was very unhappy. Therefore, with 800,000 taels, not a single cent less, he didn't want to take the person back. Other than that, he also didn't want to take the corpse back for 80,000 taels. Receiving this news, the administrator almost fainted. Those who knew about this matter all sighed endlessly. That, there should be a limit to favoring a concubine. Overstepping the etiquette could take a person's life. However, for someone like Jin Qin Wang who didn't abide by the rules, he unexpectedly attached great importance to etiquette. In the end, it was because he attached great importance to the current Jin Qin Wang Fei. If it was another person, perhaps it wouldn't be like this. However, who knew? In addition, there was a small problem with the governor's family. 250,000 taels were reduced to 250,000 taels, but when they collected, they only collected 240,000 taels. Originally, 150,000 taels was to buy the various parts of his son's body. 1,000,000 taels was to disturb and dampen the Wang Fei's mood. In reality, the Wang Fei said that the latter was waived. However, he was a second-rank official, so redeeming his son should be 900,000 taels. Thus, the final result was 240,000 taels. The governor choked on a mouthful of old blood. He couldn't spit it out, nor could he swallow it. Was he thankful that he didn't collect 100,000 taels of mood money? Or was he resentful that he bought his son's life twice? The money was given, but if his own child didn't see it, this matter wouldn't be over. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653484. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book: www.bicken.com. Biku Gua mobile reading website, bicken.com. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.